think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News Saturday. Hope you're having a smashing weekend. I'm Dawn Neeson and for the next 3 hours we'll be keeping you company on TV, online and on digital radio. Keeping you up to date on all the stories that really matter to you. Coming up this hour. Is democracy under threat? The Prime Minister has warned extremists are trying to undermine British democracy as he called for the country to come together and beat this poison. Also issuing a direct plea to pro-Palestinian protesters, calling on them to reject radicals who are hijacking their marches and urge police to take a tougher stance. Then, pro-Palestinian protesters are occupying branches of Barclays across the UK, calling for a boycott of the bank over their links to Israel arms manufacturers. We'll be at one of those protests to see if they've actually listened to Rishi Sunak's words. And the Princess of Wales spent almost 2 weeks in hospital after undergoing major abdominal surgery. And the rumour mill went into overdrive when the Prince of Wales pulled out of an event on Tuesday at very short notice because of what was called a personal matter. But this show isn't about me, it's about you. It's nothing without your views. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today or anything you want to talk about basic Saturday afternoon. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.com or message me on our socials. We're at GBNews. Very, very simple. But let's get those news headlines with Sam.
Dawn, thank you very much. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 1 minute past 12. And we start with that news Dawn's just been touching on there, that more pro-Palestine protests are planned this weekend. That's following Rishi Sunak's warning last night that Islamist extremists and far-right groups are, he says, spreading poison and trying to tear us apart. In that speech delivered from Downing Street, he called for the nation to unite, highlighting the rise in extremist disruption, intimidation, threats and planned acts of violence. It followed George Galloway's controversial win in Rochdale's by-election this week, which the Prime Minister described as beyond alarming.
The Rochdale by-election returned a candidate who dismisses the horror of what happened on October the 7th, who glorifies Hezbollah and is endorsed by Nick Griffin, the racist former leader of the BNP. I need to speak to you all this evening because this situation has gone on long enough and demands a response not just from government, but from all of us.
Well, opposition parties have given their mixed reactions to those comments from the Prime Minister yesterday, with the Liberal Democrats accusing him of sowing seeds of divisions. However, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said Rishi Sunak is right to call for the country to unite and to condemn what he called unacceptable and intimidating behaviour. Meanwhile, the new MP for Rochdale, George Galloway, who's also a former presenter for Iranian state TV, says the Prime Minister is playing a very dangerous game that could drive young Muslims into extremism.
It's worse than a lie, it's dangerous. Because, you see, if you're saying to Muslims who vote that your vote will be delegitimised if you cast it the wrong way, and if you go out on a demonstration peacefully to demonstrate, then you'll be called a terrorist, and new laws, new police approaches will be conjured forth against you. If you do that, you are driving people away from the path of democracy and peaceful democratic protest.
Well, organisers of this weekend's protests have now responded to the Prime Minister's pledge to back stronger police action, suggesting that he expels some senior MPs from the Conservative Party. It's after Rishi Sunak pledged last night to support the robust policing of demonstrations, particularly, he said, pro-Palestinian marches. The Metropolitan Police have in the past said that showing support for a terror group is a criminal offence, adding that the right to protest does come with a responsibility to act lawfully. Several local marches are planned for today and tomorrow before another national demonstration in London coming up on the 9th of March. Well, to the US now, where President Biden says that he hopes to see a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas before the start of Ramadan on the 10th of March. It comes as the US announced plans for a military airdrop of food and supplies into Gaza to tackle the growing humanitarian crisis there. And the United Nations is also warning around 25% of Gaza's population, that's more than 500,000 people, are on the brink of famine. Meanwhile, a manhunt here in the UK is underway after 3 people were injured in a shooting last night in an area of the capital popular with bars and restaurants. The shots were fired by assailants on a moped as they were being pursued by police in Clapham in South London. That was at around 5 o'clock last night. 2 people suffered shotgun pellet injuries as they were drinking at a nearby pub, and we understand a 3rd person was also injured by the moped itself. Police, though, say the injuries are not life-threatening. Now, you may remember that a cargo ship was abandoned in the Red Sea a few weeks ago. That was after Houthi missiles attacked it off the coast of Yemen. Well, that ship has now sunk. It comes after the crew on board a UK-registered ship abandoned that vessel after an explosion in the Red Sea last month. If you're watching on TV here, these are pictures as the ship was preparing to be towed for repairs, though it has now, we understand, sunk, as I said. The UK, the US and EU all have military ships in the region patrolling and protecting commercial vessels passing through the important shipping route. And it comes as attacks on vessels by Houthi rebels, backed by Iran, are now having an economic impact, disrupting international cargo shipments. And finally, the retirement of 30 jets that were used to protect British skies from potential attacks has been likened to scrapping Spitfires before the Battle of Britain. RAF bosses are grounding a fleet of Typhoons in an effort to save a reported £300 million. That's despite only completing 40% of their predicted flying hours during their lifetime. It comes as Defence Secretary Grant Shapps urges the Chancellor to increase military spending to 2.5% of GDP, something Jeremy Hunt has said won't be in next week's budget. Those are the headlines for now. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen, or of course go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Happy Saturday. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Let's get straight into today's stories. We've got a cracking show for you. Now, Rishi Sunak, you might have seen it, has claimed that democracy is under threat from extremism in the wake of Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. In a speech to the nation, he also said there are forces here at home trying to tear us apart. Let's have a listen.
I fear that our great achievement in building the world's most successful multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy is being deliberately undermined. On too many occasions recently, our streets have been hijacked by small groups who are hostile to our values and have no respect for our democratic traditions. Threats of violence and intimidation are alien to our way of doing things. They must be resisted at all times.
Ooh, so exciting, isn't it? Right, joining me now is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, hello, good afternoon, happy weekend, etc., etc. So glad I'm talking to you. Honestly, Nigel, I have never seen anything like what I saw last night with Rishi Sunak making that speech straight after George Galloway winning the Rochdale by-election. What do you make of it? You know what you're talking about with politics. What do you make of it all?
Well, I find it pretty weird too, actually. I can't see why it justified a homily to the nation on the steps of Number 10. Normally that's reserved for big announcements, and there weren't any big announcements actually in the speech, a couple of sort of small ones, really. So he could have delivered that statement to Parliament on Monday, but quite clearly he's been spooked by George Galloway's election. Now, I've got no truck with George Galloway or his opinions, but unless that it's subsequently shown that any electoral rules were broken, Rishi Sunak is making a speech about British democracy and democratic values. Well, of course, George Galloway was elected under the very principles of that British democracy.
Nigel. So, I mean, how rattled are both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party by what happened in Rochdale? This is the only conclusion I can come to. Because normally when they, as you say, when they wheel the lectern out, number 10, it was a Friday night, it was raining, no need to do this. And you thought, oh, God, they're going to announce a general election or something or other. How rattled are both of our main parties, who did appallingly in this by-election, by one man, that man being George Galloway?
Yeah, and they seem to be actually a bit panicky where they don't need to be. Now, had that been a normal by-election and George Galloway had defeated a proper Labour candidate, then yes, I think that would be really concerning. But it wasn't. The Labour candidate wasn't really the Labour candidate. So people were trying to work out where their votes went. It was significant that it was a local businessman who came second, so a lot of people decided to put their votes there. Other people there in a constituency which is 30% Muslim decided to go with George Galloway. So, I mean, this is actually a freak by-election rather than a standard one. So, as things stand, I don't think that the two leaders should be too worried.
Right, OK, well, they obviously are. They're not listening to us, Nigel. Now, I was astonished by some of the things Rishi Sunak had to say. We heard a lot of rhetoric. You know what Rishi Sunak did for me last night, Nigel? He gave me the problems, which I'm aware of, which we're all aware of. What he seemed short of was the solutions.
You're absolutely right there, and that was the bit that surprised me. Normally those things are reserved for big statements. So I couldn't see very much of a solution there. There were three things that were announced: a beefing up of Prevent, a clampdown on extremism in universities, and chucking people out who've come here on a visa if they get involved in extremism. Now, those are all things that exist anyway. So unless he's going to put some flesh on the bones of that over the coming weeks, it doesn't seem to be a major announcement. Look, I agree with the sentiments he expressed. I think democracy is under threat, and we have to be worried about extremism. But why he felt the need to make a landmark statement like that is beyond me.
You know what? If I was George Galloway this morning, and thankfully I'm not, I'd be waking up this morning thinking, blimey, I've got them all on the ropes, every single main political party. Shall we have a listen to what George himself said after Rishi Sunak's announcement or speech?
It's worse than a lie. It's dangerous. Because, you see, if you're saying to Muslims who vote that your vote will be delegitimized if you cast it the wrong way, and if you go out on a demonstration peacefully to demonstrate, then you'll be called a terrorist, and new laws, new police approaches will be conjured forth against you. If you do that, you are driving people away from the path of democracy and peaceful democratic protest.
You know what I thought was really interesting about that, Nigel? I mean, sort of like, you know, playing the race card is old hat now, but George Galloway always plays that Muslim card. I mean, you know, I think any sensible people will realise in this country that democracy is under threat. There is extremism, there is hate and there is division, not helped by George Galloway. But it was the fact he said, you know, what Rishi Sunak said was telling Muslims they are wrong. Muslims shouldn't do this. Muslims, if they protest, they are wrong. It's always playing that Muslim card with George Galloway, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was actually typical George. I mean, to actually turn around and say that we consider peaceful protesters as terrorists, just going too far. We don't consider that. We don't think that. Everyone has the right to peaceful protest, and so they should. So George is then stoking up the kind of hatred that we are trying to diminish. But all the party leaders seem to be doing this. We had the extraordinary PMQ session on Wednesday, where both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer seem to be playing that card. One was accusing the Labour Party of being anti-Semitic, which it isn't. Keir Starmer seemed to be accusing Rishi Sunak of Islamophobia, which the Tories are not. They're not helping the matter either. What we should all trying to calm things down.
Oh, wouldn't it be nice, Nigel? It's very calming to talk to you this afternoon. Thank you very much. You're going to be with me later, though, so don't go too far. You stay right where you are. But for now, I'm going to talk to my brilliant political panel I have with me today. Two experts in the field, political commentator Matthew Stadlen and broadcaster Mike Parry. I'm actually being very, very careful with Mike Parry because we support opposing football sides who are playing each other this afternoon, which puts politics into perspective, doesn't it? Right, OK, so I'm going to come to you first, Mike, on this one. I have never, I'm quite elderly, I have never, in all my years covering politics, seen anything quite like I've witnessed over the last 24 hours, 48 hours.
Yeah, well, it's not just that. The whole week's been extraordinary, because we had the by-elections last week and then we had a week's gap, and it got more and more bizarre as the week went on. I thought he was statesmanlike last night when he came out of Downing Street and stood at the lectern, but I'm not sure it was the right issue to be statesmanlike about, because what it seemed to me was, I suddenly thought, what are you doing, man? Then I thought he must have been sitting at his office in Downing Street when suddenly this light bulb went on in his head, and he thought, do you know what? What was it that Suella Braverman was telling me a few weeks ago? Extremism in society, the police not clamping down on it. I think I'll go out to that lectern and tell people this is the problem, because all he did was echo the very things that Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, had been trying to tell the country in a far more precise way than anybody else, that the problems were we've got extremism, the problems are that the police don't seem to respond to extremism on the streets, that, there is an Islamic influence which is out of proportion to the number of people here who are Muslim, and the police are not clamping down it. That's what she was sacked for, and that's the message he gave last night.
And similar, Mike, similar to Lee Anderson as well.
Yeah, well,
similar sentiment.
Similar sort of sentiment to Lee Anderson, but Suella Braverman put it much better, you know what I mean?
She didn't target.
Exactly. Suella Braverman did it in a way that people could start thinking and debating about. But when the Prime Minister said last night, this week I've met with senior police officers and made clear that the public's expectation is that not to merely manage these protests, but to police them. And I say to the police, we will back you when you take action. He should have been saying that months ago. And not only that, I sincerely believe the police have all those powers now. The problem is nobody in government, nobody at the Home Office, nobody in Downing Street is ordering the police, use the powers you've got to take extremism off our streets, which intimidates and worries large sections of our communities.
So why, coming to you, Matthew, why did it take George Galloway winning a by-election in Rochdale for Rishi Sunak to get his bottom in gear, putting it politely, and say what many of us have been thinking for ages, especially the other week when we saw that fiasco in the Houses, in the House of Parliament, where there was a mob outside, they were beaming from the river to the sea on Big Ben, and we were all screaming at our tellies then, do something about this, this is wrong. But now, suddenly we get this grand announcement after a Rochdale by-election?
Let me just deal with George Galloway first.
Good luck.
OK? I think that this is a...
By the way, George Galloway isn't here to defend himself. We would like to say that. So,
no,
it'd be great if he was.
If he did turn up, I'd be very happy to debate him. It's a dark moment, actually, for politics in this country that he was democratically elected yesterday. If you ask a lot of Jewish people, they will feel a chill about this. Now, he was democratically elected, but the turnout was minuscule. It was something like 39%. So
it's higher than the previous two by-elections, to be fair.
It is still very low, and we hope that at the next election, this big set piece, the general election, Labour will actually have a candidate that they can get behind, and that he will be defeated. It is a dark moment, OK? But it was nonetheless a democratic process. I want to turn to what Mike's been saying, because I disagree very strongly with some of what you have said.
Okay.
In my view, my criticism of Sunak isn't so much that he came out, although he should have come out before. It isn't some of the words he used, which I would support, trying to unify us. It's the fact that it was coming from him, a man who decided to employ Suella Braverman in the first place as his Home Secretary, a woman who actually is fanning the flames of division by saying the ridiculous suggestion that Islamists are in charge. Islamists are not in charge. Yes, there was a worrying moment a week or so ago when the Speaker caved to threats to MPs.
That was more than worrying.
It was worrying, and that must never happen again, because our democracy must never give in to threats or to the mob. But are we, generally speaking, as a society, as a political system, as a democracy, giving in to the mob? No, we're not. And Sunak is responsible for some of the division that he now claims he wants to set aside.
Yeah, but Matt, I'm sorry, how can you say we're not giving in to the mob when the police just stand there impotently and put those messages on Big Ben from the river to the sea? That's genocidal talk. That is a genocidal mantra to get rid of 7 million Jewish people who live in Israel. So I don't know how you can say that. And there's one thing I agree with you on, or maybe disagree with you on. I'm not as frightened about this result as people are saying they are, because in Rochdale, there is 30% of the people there are Muslims. Only 1/6 of people voted for George Galloway, OK? And I do think it will reverse again at the general election. So I do think people are spreading a lot of terror about this outcome. It was bound to have an influence on Muslim people in that part of the world. And George Galloway is an incredibly astute politician, a great campaigner, did exactly what he knew he could do, touched the blue touch paper, lit the blue touch paper, set the rocket off, and people respond to him, but not very many compared to the overall population of the town.
Let's address what happened then at Parliament, right?
Yeah.
We've got to be able to distinguish between individual decisions made by police officers, maybe empowered and encouraged, we don't know, by their superiors, and the general state of society. I wouldn't touch those marches with a barge pole, although I am very, very, very strong in my view that Israel's reaction to October the 7th is wrong. I wouldn't go near those marches because I know that there will be some anti-Semites on them. But I have to say that they have been largely peaceful. If individual police...
No, they've instilled terror.
Well, they shouldn't have.
They have instilled terror.
That has been whipped up, I think, by the media.
I don't think it has.
If individual police officers are getting it wrong, that does need to be addressed. But let's not confuse operational policing decisions with the general state of British society. We are not overall being ruled by the mob. And we need to distinguish, and you would agree with me on this, between Islamists, for whom I have no time whatsoever, and the vast majority of British Muslims who are law-abiding, many of whom are generous and charitable. Just as we need to distinguish, by the way, between right-wing people, you would describe yourself roughly of the right, I think, and the far right. OK? There is a distinction to be made.
Yeah, we might not be getting run by Islamists and the mob and all that, but the mob are having a very frightening effect on our society. When people go out into the streets and wave their flags around and chant these despicable slogans, and our police, who work for all of us, stand aside and let them do it, that is a terrible, terrible indictment of the rule of law in that country. And even the Prime Minister now has finally discovered that, and I hope he'll do more than just talk about it and introduce some new laws this week to make sure the police do crack down on the terror.
My hope and my expectation is that where there is law-breaking, police officers, if they think that they are outnumbered in a particular moment and they don't respond there and then, that they will take photographs and videos. They will
Shouldn't they have been doing that already?
And they will arrest after the event.
Shouldn't they have been doing that already?
A decision on the ground. But yes, if the police are not being tough enough, they need to be tough. Any criminality, I've said this from the beginning vis-a-vis these marches, any criminality, any anti-Semitism has to be clamped down.
Of course it has, and instilling terror on the streets is a crime.
It is, and, well, we are where we are at the moment, aren't we? Unfortunately, I have to leave it there. I could listen to you two all day. It's such a huge topic, it really is. But if you want to find out more analysis and opinion on that, even better than these two, just go to our website, gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News on Saturday. It's a weekend. Hope you're enjoying it. Lots more coming up on today's show. Pro-Palestinian protesters, we've just been talking about them, are occupying branches of Barclays across the UK today, calling for a boycott of the bank after their links to Israel arms manufacturers. We'll be at one of those protesters live to see if they are indeed listening to Rishi Sunak's words. All of that and much more to come. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So after his mad dash to see his father last week, Prince Harry predictably went on TV to talk about it. He gave his first interview to Good Morning America, whilst apparently being filmed by a crew that were doing a documentary on the Invictus Games. He didn't disclose his father's diagnosis, but frankly, even the fact that he was on TV talking about it was concerning. No wonder they're keeping him at arm's length. This is what he said.
How did you get the news that the King was ill?
I spoke to him.
And what did you do next?
I jumped on a plane and went to go and see him as soon as I could.
How was that visit for you emotionally?
Look, I love my family. The fact that I was able to get on a plane and go and see him and spend any time with him, I'm grateful for that.
An illness in the family can have a galvanizing or sort of reunifying effect for a family.
Absolutely.
Is that possible in this case?
Yeah, I'm sure. Throughout all these families, I see it on a day-to-day basis. The strength of the family unit coming together.
He also said that he loves his family, but then he said that he had his own family in America. So which family does he love? The late Queen's last few years of life were marred with accusations of racism, which Harry later backtracked on, claiming that they hadn't actually used the word, so inadvertently admitting to gaslighting us all. But the Sussex's stock is falling in the States, and the only thing that makes them interesting is their proximity to the royal family. And now the King is ill, Harry has even offered to muck in and take on official duties to help his father. Look, I want to see reconciliation and love and joy, but I'm afraid Meghan has yet to even speak to her father as far as we know, and Harry didn't apparently even reach out to his brother. Whilst his dad might fall for it, I doubt William will be as soft. Good luck with that, Harry.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson. Happy weekend, people. I'm on your TV, online and on digital radio. Lucky you, eh? And now, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters are marching across the country once again today, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. They've been going on for over 4 months across the country in cities like London, Manchester and Edinburgh. But the protests aren't just happening in the street now. Pro-Palestinian protesters are also occupying branches of Barclays Bank, calling for a boycott of the bank over links to Israel arms manufacturers. Joining me now is our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who is loitering somewhere near a Barclays Bank, I believe. Yes, there you are, Jack, outside of Barclays Bank. Jack, what's going on? How many protesters are there and what are they up to?
Well, we're probably looking at less than 100 protesters here, particularly here in Wolverhampton, but this is all action organised by the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign all across the country today at multiple branches of Barclays Bank, from Wales to the southeast to where we are here in the West Midlands. There are protesters on this day of action calling for people to try and boycott this bank. It's a little bit of a change in tactic as well from the campaign, who's saying that they feel like boycotts are working more maybe than other methods, but they're saying, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, that they're from their own research. They say that Barclays Bank holds over £1 billion in shares and provides £3 billion in loans and underwriting to 9 companies, they say, whose weapons components and military technology are being used by Israel on its attacks, of course, against the likes of Hamas and those people within Gaza. So that's why they're here outside the likes of Barclays here in the West Midlands and also across the country as well. The protests here particularly particularly today. They've had some music, not in terms of the chanting that we've seen at other protests. So with the music playing in the background that you might be able to hear behind me, with their flags demanding a ceasefire now, and they've been waving flags as cars have gone by, trying to encourage people to beat their horns in support. But of course, with these protests, there does also come some opposition from some people that have been walking by these protesters, feeling angry at of course, their cause, trying to put their side across. There has been one member of the public that was spoken to by West Midlands police here. There have been a few police in attendance, but of course this all goes, doesn't it, back to what Rishi Sunak was saying on the streets of Downing Street last night about wanting him wanting the police to police protests rather than just stand by. So the police have got involved when they've needed to here particularly, but just in the case of this protest specifically, there hasn't been any necessarily kind of important steps or action that they've had to take against any of them. Just a few talking to a few members of the public who very quickly were starting to kind of rise tensions. But that's very much how these things do overspill in the first place. Of course, around the country there might well be more tensioned protests, particularly as well in Birmingham, as we saw a few weeks ago. Then we are people actually occupying the bank inside. These protesters haven't actually gone inside the bank today, simply standing outside it. That will be very much the case across the country, unless, of course, some protesters decide to take it into their hands, particularly. But responding to what Rishi Sunak was saying on the streets of Downing Street yesterday about feeling like that there is some intimidation going on around the country, that the actual leader of the Palestinian Solidarity campaign, Ben Jamal, he said on Twitter that Rishi Sunak, if he wants to deal with extremists, should start to look at the politicians, political commentators, he says, and religious leaders who are supporting what they are saying is a genocide in Palestine. And he says that he should look in the mirror around his cabinet table and kick out the likes of Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick and Michael Gove first.
Jack, just very briefly, we're running out of time. When you say the police got involved, was that with the protesters or with a member of the public walking past who was angry at the protest?
That was just a member of the public who was angry at the protesters.
Right.
He was shouting quite a lot, obviously supporting Israel over the likes of Palestine, and obviously not feeling like these protests should still be going on. So wasn't no formal arrests made, just simply a talking to from the police officer to calm down.
OK, brilliant. That's Jack Carson there in our Westminster reporter in Wolverhampton, I think he said, wasn't he? Outside of Barclays Bank, where there are protests going on, as you saw there. Interesting, though, the police taking more action straight away after Rishi Sunak's statement yesterday. Right, OK, you're with me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News Saturday. Lots more coming up on today's show, but here's the news headlines with Sam before we go there.
Dawn, thank you very much, and good afternoon from the newsroom. The headlines at just after 1 o'clock. As we've been hearing, more pro-Palestine protests are taking place today following Rishi Sunak's warning last night that Islamist extremists and far-right groups are, he says, spreading poison and trying to tear us apart. In that speech delivered from Downing Street, he called for the nation to unite, highlighting the rise in extremist disruption, intimidation, threats and planned acts of violence. It followed George Galloway's controversial win in the Rochdale by-election this week, which the Prime Minister described as beyond alarming. Organisers of those protests this weekend have now responded to the Prime Minister's pledge to back stronger police action, suggesting that he expels some senior MPs from the Conservative Party. It's after Rishi Sunak pledged to support the robust policing of demonstrations, particularly pro-Palestinian marches. The Met Police have in the past said that showing support for a terror group is a criminal offence, adding that the right to protest does come with a responsibility to act lawfully. Several local marches are planned today and more tomorrow before another national demonstration in London on the 9th of March. A cargo ship which was abandoned in the Red Sea after a Houthi missile attack has now sunk. And that comes as the UK's Maritime Agency has reported in the last half hour that a fresh attack on another vessel off the coast of Yemen, where the militant group backed by Iran have been attacking shipping lanes, has also been attacked. The UK, the US and EU all have patrols in the region. to protect commercial vessels that are passing through that important shipping route. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, let's get back to Dawn.
Thank you, Sam. Now, remember, you can get in touch about all the stuff we're talking today by emailing me, really simple, gbviews@gbnews.com. On your screen there, you can see it. Or message me on our socials, we're at GB News. And there's loads more coming up on today's show for you. Now, the Princess of Wales, remember her? She hasn't been seen since undergoing a major abdominal surgery. And the rumour mill has gone into overdrive when the Prince of Wales pulled out of an event on Tuesday at very short notice because of what was called a personal matter. I want to know, should the royals break their silence to put those rumours to bed? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson and you're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
People in this field and they talk about mental health assistance. And I know from personal experience within my own family circle that the help is just not there.
I know that with speaking to many families who've got autistic children and adults. They are really struggling at the moment, whether it's to do with education, getting a diagnosis. You know, once they get to 18 to 25, where's the help? There isn't the help there with social care. You know, I just set up a petition as well, who's going to look after my sons when I'm no longer around? Because that's that's the story and the question that's at the back of every parent's mind. It's just so hard at the moment, and lots of small charities are closing. And for me, they're the backbone of the society because they're the ones that speak, you know, to parents continually all the time, or autistic adults. So,
and why has it to be that way? And, you know, we'll get government minister after government minister coming on and saying, we have greatly added to the resource here. We've had another 2.5 people we've hired last year and whatever. And they twist statistics and they make it all sound good. But I know from the work I do in the charitable world, and I know from people who I know personally, it just isn't there. So stop telling it is. And the thing is, the demand for mental health care has just ballooned.
The earlier you start working with children who are autistic, the better the outcomes. I've seen it myself, and I know it with my own sons. I shouldn't have had to set up a school and remortgage my home, you know, for my boys. And so many parents are still struggling, like 20-odd years from when my boys were diagnosed, and they're saying it's improving, and we're talking about awareness, we're talking about acceptance. It's hard because I'm juggling caring, I'm juggling, you know, taking him to college, picking him up. You know, I'm running a charity, I'm doing events. I know I'm a workaholic, but I'm very passionate and I'm very driven.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Happy Saturday. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. It is the weekend. I know, it seems like it's not a long week. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on, well, the political dramas of the week, basically. Rishi Sunak, Rochdale, George Galloway. I mean, you couldn't make this up, could you? So let's see what you've got to say. Right, let's go to Michael first. Michael, good afternoon, Michael. Thanks for getting in touch. You say our government and local authorities don't work for us. They use us as a cash cow and we pay them for it as well. So we deserve everything we are going to get. You know what, Michael, I think an awful lot of people feel the same as you at the moment. That's why I think Labour and the Conservatives did so badly in that by-election, because they really were, and Lib Dems were nowhere in sight, were they? Meanwhile, William on George Galloway, good afternoon, William, he says, George Galloway, all members of Parliament should stand together at the doors of Parliament and bar the way of him entering. He's no more than a hate-preaching person. Now, that's a bit strong. He's democratically elected and George isn't here to defend himself, which he would do because he is brilliant at doing that sort of thing and he has had a lot of practice, hasn't he? So let's go now to Alan on Rishi Sunak. This is one conversation that's really got to you all. Alan says, it was correct for the PM to highlight that people need to wake up and smell the coffee if we wish to maintain our democratic way of life. And you know what? I thought it was very dramatic when he came out. You can see there now, out of number 10, with the lectern there. And who didn't think, right, OK, you heard the announcement, Rishi Sunak's going to make an announcement, and you thought, oh, my God, it's the general election, they're going to do it. And then that happened. And it's like, I've never witnessed anything like that at all in many, many years of politics. But is he talking for you? Is Rishi Sunak talking for you? GB Views at GB News. Get in touch. As Marion has done, and Marion, you're talking about George Galloway. Thank you so much for getting in touch. Marion, you say, Sunak is reacting to the strength of feeling of many of the people in this country. You're not alone on this one. And you say you only had to listen to your own interviews with the people of Rochdale. This by-election was won on a point of foreign policy issues and not anything to do with the needs of the people of Rochdale. And, you know, I think that sums it up, isn't it? I mean, I wasn't counting, but if I counted how many times George Galloway mentioned Rochdale and how many times he mentioned Palestine and Gaza, I bet there wasn't that much difference. But as I said, I wasn't counting. And look, I'm not having a go. George isn't here. And I said, if he was, and it'd be great, George, if you fancy giving us a call, it would be great to talk to him, wouldn't it? Really fascinating to talk to him. Now, let's move on. Let's talk about sport, because it's a Saturday. One of the most powerful men in Formula One is continuing to deny allegations of inappropriate behaviour against him. Red Bull's team principal, Christian Horner, who's married to the former Spice Girl, Geri Halliwell, was cleared of misconduct this week after an internal investigation into his behaviour towards a female colleague. But the scandal continues to dominate the start of the F1 season after a series of messages allegedly involving Horner were leaked. Horner has continually denied all allegations of inappropriate behaviour. In a statement, he said, I'm not going to comment on anonymous speculation from unknown sources. I followed in full the grievance process, which was completed in a thorough way, the result of which was the grievance was dismissed and, as I said, I can't comment on unknown sources. Wow, it's been an amazing week for news, hasn't it? Joining me now is a sport broadcaster, journalist and all-round guru on all these sort of things, Aidan McGee. Aidan, thank you so much for coming in. Now,
can I just say, though, Dawn, you said former Spice Girl. Apparently you're a Spice Girl for life.
Your head's all about sport.
I know.
Stick to it. But I know nothing about the Spice Girls quite clearly. I know very little about Formula One, but this story has got me interested.
Well, you know, it's actually not been very interesting in the last few years. It's been quite processional with Max Verstappen winning it. It's rare. It's rare that I've seen on the back page of the tabloids, let alone on the front, as it was emblazoned across the Sun this morning, with Geri Halliwell having been mid-air heading to Bahrain when the latest file of
the mirror and the sun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's an amazing story. I mean, it was she was flying. She was mid-air as the latest file of WhatsApp messages were dropped. We should say as well that we're not actually sure. Nobody knows for certain if these are actually real.
No.
And so, you know, we can't. It's difficult to make suppositions in these kind of with these kind of stories. However, whoever has decided is behind this, assuming they are true, supposing they are true, is obviously not satisfied with how Red Bull dealt with it in their headquarters in Austria. It is an internal case. It's not something that the FAI felt they needed to get involved in, but they've dropped this bombshell and everybody received it, Dawn. It's almost like sending one of those all-rounder emails to everybody in the office, to like 400 people.
Yeah, a fitness instructor who randomly received this tranche of emails.
They wanted everybody to see it.
Yeah.
And I think the next stage from a strategy point of view for the people behind it would be to say, well, OK, we weren't happy with the way Red Bull dealt with it. We thought they'd get rid of him on account of that. But the next stage is to maybe take it further, prompt the investigation, or the probe, if you like, if there is to be a probe, to go further to the point where in such a commercialised sport, maybe some of the big names, the big sponsors might say, you know, all right, it's not a perfect storm or perfect situation to remove him from his job for something that's happened internally with an employee, but goodness me, it's not reflecting well on the sport, it's not reflecting well on sponsors. He's not somebody we, as an individual, that we want to be associated with.
It's a Bahrain Grand Prix this weekend.
It's today, 3 o'clock.
It's today at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
OK, right. And he's there.
He is with Jerry Halliwell, yeah.
Right. So he's been seen with Jerry.
He has indeed, yes.
Right, OK. Do they look happy?
Well, they're putting on a united front. So I don't know if you can probably look happy. You can probably fake it in some ways, can't you? But you know, I don't know. Maybe he's given her assurances that it's all fake. It's part of a sting. It's something that untoward is going on. I don't know the nature of their conversations, but they are there. It would have looked a bit sus if she'd not been there, I would have thought, because she normally goes to the races to be alongside him. He's a very important man in F1.
This is the problem. How important is he, and how good is he at his job?
He's exceptionally good at his job.
To get rid of him, no matter what he's done or not done.
Well, the main person in the team would be the driver. Max Verstappen won 22 out of 23 races last year. That's why it's become quite dull. And this is why F1 doesn't really need this, because it needs some fire in it. It needs some sparks. It needs on the track, literally, because we're not going to see Lewis Hamilton moving to Ferrari until next season. So although Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari, also his Mercedes car has shown signs of improvement over the practice and over the qualifying, I don't think they're going to catch Max Verstappen. I don't think anyone else is. So they need something to happen on the track. At the moment, this is happening off the track. It's going to damage the reputation of the sport. But in terms of how important Christian Horner is, yeah, he's been part of that team. Max Verstappen rates him. Max Verstappen said that he was a little bit distracted in the last 48 hours or so. He admitted that. He didn't say, oh yeah, nothing's happened. Everything's normal. He did concede that his boss was distracted, as you might imagine would be the case. But for them, it's business as usual. He's fastest in qualifying. I think he'll win the Bahrain Grand Prix this afternoon.
So it'd be interesting to see what happens there.
It will.
Wow. McGee, thank you so much.
Good to see you, Dawn.
Really gets interesting. Right, OK, I'm Dawn Neeson on GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. The Princess of Wales, remember her? That's what she looks like. Hasn't been seen since undergoing major abdominal surgery. And the rumour mill went into overdrive when the Prince of Wales pulled out of an event on Tuesday. Very short notice, because of what was called a personal matter. I want to know, should the royals break their silence and never complain, never explain, to put those rumours to bed? All of that and much more coming up. I'm Dawn Neeson, and you're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
We're always told that there is a huge need for care workers in Britain. We're always told that the salaries just aren't big enough against the benefit system for British people to want to do that work. And there probably is some real truth in that. And yet, if up to 25% of those that come are acting illegally, and it would seem up until now that in some areas foreign care workers come in but bring in almost the same number of family members with them, that we need to have a proper debate about this. I'm very pleased to be joined by Mike Padgham, chair of the Independent Care Group. If I accept those arguments for a moment, how can it be that the system is so lax that up to 25% are found by the Inspector of Borders and Immigration to be working illegally?
Well, good evening to you, Nigel. was good to join you. I mean, those figures are shocking to me. When I looked at it today, when I saw that 275 visas had been issued to a care home that didn't even exist, and a further over 1,000 people joined a company that only had previously 4 staff in it, it makes me wonder the bureaucracy of the Home Office didn't think to check that these companies exist in the first place, because it should be quite straightforward. If people are providing care, they're regulated by the Care Quality Commission. It's a simple phone call to check and double check. Sadly, there seems to have been very many loopholes at the beginning. I believe that's been tightened now, but I can't understand it, because all the providers that are doing it in the proper way have to go through quite a rigmarole to actually get approved, and it takes months. So it beggars belief that this has happened and people have been approved for a company that doesn't even exist.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on TV, online and on digital radio. It's about 12:50, but you don't need to know because it's Saturday afternoon, and hopefully you've got nowhere to rush off to. Stay here, watch me. Right, now, we're used to lots of rumours about the royals, but has social media gone too far? Royal aides are slamming online conspiracy theories about Kate Middleton's health. The Princess of Wales spent almost 2 weeks in hospital after undergoing major abdominal surgery in January. And the rumour mill really went into overdrive when the Prince of Wales pulled out of an event on Tuesday at very short notice because of what was called a personal matter. Now, I'm sorry I don't do conspiracy theories, but I'm absolutely fascinated. I know I hate myself to find out what is happening to Kate or Catherine. Joining me now is royal correspondent and writer Michael Cole. Michael, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, I hate myself. I pride myself on being professional on these matters, but I am desperate to know what's going on with Kate. Why? Can they just not give us a clue, put a picture out, a statement, give us an update? What's going on?
Good afternoon, Dawn. But let us start, I think, by sending our collective good wishes to the Princess of Wales for a speedy and complete recovery. As you've said, comprehensively, she was a long time in hospital, 13 nights. Obviously, it wasn't a minor matter, but the palace, Kensington Palace, was candid. It said there was nothing cancerous about what went on there. And, of course, she's not housebound. She is living at Adelaide Cottage in the middle of Windsor Great Park, but she's also been up to their house, Anmore Hall, on the Sandringham estate for the half-term holiday with the children. And I think it's worth just saying what she has said through the press office at Kensington Palace. And she said, I do hope that the public will understand her desire to maintain as much normality for her children as possible, and her wish that her personal medical information remains private. Well, of course, I think that's entirely appropriate and proper and understandable. No woman or any person wants their private medical matters discussed in public. And I think probably at the back of her mind is the thought of her children going to school and one of the kids saying to Prince George or Princess Charlotte, you know, what's wrong with your mum? And then the word coming out through the rumour mill. And of course, as you've said, social media, which is very valuable, I'm sure, in some ways, is also a very evil brew at other times. And rumour is a lying jade and is halfway around the world before truth has got its boots on. Having said all that, I gave big brownie points to KP and also Buckingham Palace for being candid when the King went into hospital and when she went into hospital, the Princess. And I think they could be a little bit more candid, give us some understanding of what's going on.
Because there is obviously a genuine concern as well. She's a fit, young, healthy woman. She's got 3 small children. And, you know, I completely understand your point, Michael, about sort of like, you know, the children want to be kept out of it. But, you know, kids are going to be asking them in any case, because kids are kids. I mean, you know, they're all on social media these days. So they will be saying to Catherine's children, what's wrong with your mum? So we'll be asking these questions in any case. So it's a, you know, it's a combination of some of the rumours out there are astonishing. So just, will they ever give us any more?
Dawn, you're not just a woman, you're a distinguished woman, and I'm sure that you would share Catherine's inhibitions about sharing too much of her personal life. And do bear in mind that when she went into hospital before the birth of Prince George with very, very severe morning sickness, afterwards she was quite candid about that, and I think she's referred to it at least. So at the appropriate time, I think she will come forward and she will explain. I mean, in the meantime, we just have to pray and hope that everything is okay. And there's no reason to believe it isn't. Kensington Palace has said that she's making good progress. I don't think they would say that
unfortunately,
otherwise.
We'll leave it on the word good progress, because that is a nice thing to end on. We're running out of time. Michael Cole, thank you so much. A pleasure, as always, to talk to you. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News on Saturday, and there's loads more coming up. But I think we need to have a look at the weather. I'm getting told off here. So here's the weather with Greg.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. We still have areas of rain, sleet and snow pushing northward through today. Frost and fog and some icy stretches for tonight, and staying quite cold, and we can see that nicely on the air mass chart. This pool of cold air sat over the UK, something milder trying to come in by the beginning of next week, but a cold weekend to come. Through the rest of the afternoon into the evening time, we've got these areas, outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow pushing northwards across northern England and Scotland, perhaps affecting parts of Northern Ireland too, are covering over the high ground. Overnight, clearing skies, particularly across central and southern parts of England and Wales. We could see some dense fog patches, some frost and icy stretches as temperatures fall below freezing here. So a bright start in some places, drier than it was on Saturday morning, but some dense fog patches, particularly across central southern England. This slowly lifting and breaking through the day. And then overall, Sunday will be a bright day, some sunny spells, scattered showers across western areas, again a bit wintry over the higher ground. This weather front could give some thicker cloud across the far east of the country. Temperatures quite cool still, 7 to 9 Celsius, but in any sunshine, not feeling too bad. And then for Monday, a cold and frosty start, some fog patches, and then that mild air starts to come in, but in association with this area of rain across southern and southwestern areas. Over the next few days, it brightens up a little. There'll be some sunny spells and temperatures start to rise as well, back into double figures, particularly in the south.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Is a debate on gender really a far-right issue?
Far right. I'm so bored of that phrase, you know what I mean? Like, anyone who talks about, anyone who acknowledges that there are two sexes is suddenly far right, because that's what Hitler and Mussolini were all about. This question from Shirley is, of course, about Labour. They've been accused of being undemocratic because they pressured a pub into cancelling a debate, and this debate features Kelly J. Keane, who's been on this show a couple of times, and she's a campaigner, and she was just on the panel. and then they got a letter saying that they couldn't do it because Kelly J. Keane apparently attracts far-right groups. Now, they've tried this trick before, but because some awful, ghastly neo-Nazi types turned up near to an event that she was holding in Australia, they kind of tried to blame that on her and suggest that the two were the same thing. They weren't. That was an opportunistic group turning up to... They're not... Neo-Nazis aren't pro-feminist. They're not pro an event called Let Women Speak. That's just ridiculous.
New Zealand's TV blurred her touching her zip because they said that her touching her zip was a far-right dog whistle because she's making that symbol.
Yeah, but she wasn't making the symbol, she was just adjusting a zip.
Yeah, and also, this isn't a far-right symbol.
I mean, that was incredible because she obviously wasn't making that symbol anyway. She was just adjusting a top. But this New Zealand news channel blurred out the hand so that they could pretend that it was some horrible ghastly... Yeah. I mean, this is stuff, isn't it?
She's talked about having voted Labour in the past. She's so not far right.
But also, even if she were right-wing, which she isn't, why would they be banning a panel where there's a discussion about one of the most important issues of our day? What are Labour playing at here?
They're anti-democratic, aren't they? They're just kind of playing whack-a-mole with things they don't like. I think maybe I'll write to the pub and say I do want to see Kelly J. Keane there.
Yeah, but they won't listen to you if you say that, will they? Because you've got the unfashionable opinion, Chris.
Well, and the unfashionable workplace.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to GB News Saturday. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I'm Dawn Neeson. For the next 2 hours, we're keeping you company on your telly, online and on digital radio, keeping you up to date on all the stories that really matter to you. Now, I've got a cracking show, so don't go too far. Coming up this hour, is democracy under threat? The Prime Minister has warned extremists are trying to undermine British democracy. Rishi Sunak also called on Palestinian protesters to reject radicals who are hijacking their marches and urged police to take a tougher stance. Pro-Palestinian protesters, that's them there, occupy branches of Barclays across the UK, calling for a boycott of the bank over their links to Israel arms manufacturers. We'll be live in Wolverhampton, where one of those protests are taking place. And a new government review is recommended that trans police officers may no longer be allowed to strip search suspects of the opposite biological sex. But, contrary to popular belief, this show isn't about me, it's about you. Nothing without your views. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing about today, or anything you want to talk about, basically. gbviews@gbnews.com, or message me on our socials. We're at GB News. But first, let's get those news headlines with the lovely Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much. Good afternoon. I have been informed it is now 1:01 exactly. And we start with a recap of that top story that we've been covering all day, that more pro-Palestine protests are planned this weekend, following Rishi Sunak's warning last night that Islamist extremists and far-right groups are, he says, spreading poison and trying to tear us apart. In that speech delivered from Downing Street, he called for the nation to unite, highlighting the rise in extremist disruption, intimidation, threats and planned acts of violence. It followed George Galloway's controversial win in the Rochdale by-election this week, which the Prime Minister described as beyond alarming.
The Rochdale by-election returned a candidate who dismisses the horror of what happened on October the 7th, who glorifies Hezbollah and is endorsed by Nick Griffin, the racist former leader of the BNP. I need to speak to you all this evening because this situation has gone on long enough and demands a response not just from government, but from all of us.
In response to that statement by the Prime Minister last night, opposition parties have given mixed reactions, with the Liberal Democrats accusing him of sowing seeds of divisions. However, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said that Rishi Sunak is right to call the country to unite and to condemn what he called unacceptable and intimidating behaviour. Meanwhile, the new MP for Rochdale, George Galloway, who's also a former presenter for Iranian state TV, has said the Prime Minister is playing a very dangerous game that could drive young Muslims into extremism.
It's worse than a lie, it's dangerous. Because, you see, if you're saying to Muslims who vote that your vote will be delegitimised if you cast it the wrong way, and if you go out on a demonstration peacefully to demonstrate, then you'll be called a terrorist, and new laws, new police approaches will be conjured forth against you. If you do that, you are driving people away from the path of democracy and peaceful democratic protest.
Organisers of the protest this weekend have now responded to the Prime Minister's pledge to back stronger police action, suggesting that he should expel some senior MPs from the Conservative Party. It's after Rishi Sunak pledged last night to support robust policing of demonstrations, particularly, he said, pro-Palestinian marches. The Metropolitan Police have in the past said that showing support for a terror group is a criminal offence, adding that the right to protest does come with a responsibility to act within the law. Several local marches are planned today, as we've been hearing, and more tomorrow before another national demonstration here in London on the 9th of March. To the US, and President Biden says that he hopes to see a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas before the start of Ramadan on the 10th of March. It comes as the US announced plans for a military aid drop of food and supplies into Gaza to tackle the growing humanitarian crisis there. The United Nations is also warning around 25% of the population in Gaza, as more than 500,000 people are on the brink of famine. Back here in the UK, a manhunt is now underway after 3 people were injured in a shooting in an area of London that's popular with bars and restaurants. Shots were fired by assailants on a moped as they were being pursued by police in Clapham in the south of the city at around 5 o'clock last night. 2 people, we understand, suffered shotgun pellet injuries as they were drinking at a nearby pub, and a 3rd person was also injured by the moped itself. Police say the injuries, though, are not life-threatening. And a cargo ship which was abandoned in the Red Sea after a recent Houthi missile strike off the coast of Yemen has now sunk, we understand. It comes as reports from the UK's Maritime Agency has also suggested in the last hour or so that the militant group backed by Iran have also attacked another vessel in the region just off the coast of Yemen. And the UK, the US and EU all currently have military ships patrolling the region to protect commercial vessels passing through the important shipping route. And finally, the retirement of 30 Typhoon jets that were used to protect British skies from potential attacks has been likened to scrapping Spitfires before the Battle of Britain. RAF bosses are grounding the fleet of Typhoons in an effort to save a reported £300 million. That's despite only completing 40% of their predicted flying hours during their lifespan. It comes as the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, is urging the Chancellor to increase military spending to 2.5% of GDP, which is something Jeremy Hunt has said won't be in next week's budget. Those are the headlines. I'll be back in half an hour. In the meantime, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or of course go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Now, Rishi Sunak has claimed that democracy is under threat from extremism in the wake of Hamas' October 7th attack on Israel. In a speech to the nation, he also said that our forces here at home trying to tear us apart. Let's take a listen.
But I fear that our great achievement in building the world's most successful multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy is being deliberately undermined. And I want to speak directly to those who choose to continue to protest. Don't let the extremists hijack your marches. You have a chance in the coming weeks to show that you can protest decently, peacefully, and with empathy for your fellow citizens. Let us prove these extremists wrong and show them that even when we disagree, we will never be disunited from our common values of decency and respect.
Right, OK. Well, joining me now is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Nigel, quite the most astonishing time in politics. We've been around for a long time, I think combined possibly about 400 years. But I don't remember a week quite as mad as we've had. The lectern, the Friday night, the dark. We're expecting a general election announcement maybe, and instead we got this speech. What did you make of it?
Well, I just think that Rishi Sunak is putting too much on George Galloway's election in Rochdale. This is the fourth time that George Galloway has been an MP. And while he's a skillful speaker, and I know from experience you have to be on your toes to debate with him, he's always created more noise than sense. So the idea that suddenly politics has changed because he's just been elected as an MP seems to be going a bit far. But certainly that appears to have spooked Rishi Sunak and to an extent Keir Starmer.
He's got not just Rishi Sunak, but he's got Keir Starmer rattled. He seems to have everybody in the political establishment rattled. Now, he is an incredibly successful campaigner. As you say, Nigel, I've tried to interview him. It's hard going. He's very, very clever, very sharp, and he can be, it has to be said, quite intimidating. So why has this one man rattled the whole of British politics so much?
I think that British politics just basically needs to calm down at the moment. And it's incumbent on our political leaders to stop fostering the illusion that if you're on the right of politics, you're somehow Islamophobic, left, you're anti-Semitic. This is an election year, and you don't want those two things to become the subject of an election. But why someone like George Galloway should suddenly upend British politics? He hasn't done it before. He's often claimed that's what his election means, just as he's done in Rochdale. But he will just be another one of 650 MPs, even if a very loud one.
So do you think Rishi Sunak, I mean, it was very dramatic, do you think Rishi Sunak was right to come out and say what he said in the way he said it last night?
It's the way he said it, I think, that I'm a bit disturbed about. I mean, I've got nothing against the sentiments he expressed, that it's absolutely right we should all unite behind all the principles of British democracy. What was a bit weird, though, is he felt he'd have to come out on a Friday night onto the steps of Downing Street, which is usually reserved for urgent and major announcements, and say it there. He could quite easily have tweeted everything he said, or alternatively give a statement to the House of Commons on Monday.
And of course, it's all red meat to George Galloway himself, who I think, can we see what he had to say in response?
It's worse than a lie. It's dangerous. Because, you see, if you're saying to Muslims who vote that your vote will be delegitimized if you cast it the wrong way, and if you go out on a demonstration peacefully to demonstrate, then you'll be called a terrorist, and new laws, new police approaches will be conjured forth against you. If you do that, you are driving people away from the path of democracy and peaceful democratic protest.
The thing is, right, OK, I think most people... I'm going to read you this email, actually, Nigel. This is a viewer who's got in touch, Mike. Good afternoon, Mike. Thank you for this. So Mike's saying, right, I got the... And we all did the same, didn't we? I made tea, got ready to watch this very unusual broadcast. All for what? Sunak told us what we already knew. He told us what his colleagues had been telling him and getting in trouble for, i.e. Suella Braverman, Lee Anderson and several others. They got in trouble for it. Rishi Sunak just said it in a slightly different way. Well, this is Mike saying now, I was so shocked that he came out and said what we all already know. Nothing about what he's going to do about it. And that's what I heard as well. I heard what the problem is, which we're all aware of. I didn't hear what the solutions were.
No, I think that's right. I agree with Mike totally. Everything he's actually just said there. He didn't come up with solutions. I mean, what the announcements he did make was to beef up Prevent, which is designed to stop radicalisation. He hasn't explained how he will do that. And there's an example of something that's a bit peculiar, that in the same breath he was talking about dealing with extremism on university campuses. Now, Prevent training has actually just changed. What it used to say is that extremists should not be allowed to speak in universities. Now the Prevent guidance is, yes, they should be allowed to speak, but they should be challenged when they do. So it seems to be that the government's all over the place when they actually try and deal with this issue.
Well, things you never hear about politics at the moment. It's all over the place. It's divided. And I think yesterday, or this week in general, really has just proved that point. Nigel, that's Nigel Nelson there, our GB News senior political commentator, who is joining us later on as well. Thank you, Nigel, for that. Now, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and much more, go to our website, gbnews.com. Now, should the government crack down on health tourism? Some NHS hospitals have lost over 180 million to health tourists, people who travel from abroad for medical treatment here, since a government pledged to crack down on the scandal, with some services losing equivalent of £100,000 a day. Now, this affects my local hospital, which is a London hospital. I'm not going to name it, but, I mean, I've got a friend who works there, and some of the stories they tell me would make your hair go. Now, joining me now is former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and host of GB News Saturday 5, Albie and Makona. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, they say I always say this about these two, my favourite pairing, but I don't say it about everyone, and I do genuinely mean it, Scarlett, honestly. So I'm going to come to you first, Scarlett. Now, as I said, this health tourism thing, I think various governments have said over the past, we're clamping down on it. Unless you're here and you're paying your national insurance, you can't get free healthcare. So why do I hear the most horrific stories from my friend who works in this big London hospital about people literally getting off a plane, giving birth, taking the babies and going home again? Sometimes flying in on private jets, by the way. Oh, why is it still happening?
But look, the thing is that Britain tries to attract what we call health tourism. I mean, it's done as a scandal. Oh, isn't this terrible? These foreigners come in. I mean, actually, for the most part, we charge them. It's just that a lot of hospitals are not very good at picking up the bill.
Yes.
And I was reading a National Audit Office report, which is where this comes from. And what they're saying is the trusts have to get better at this, is that they keep saying that they will get better. So it's not about, oh, God, these dreadful foreigners. This is great. I mean, we're number 5 in the world, and it's because we're so good that we attract people. You know, Canada doesn't go, ooh, all these dreadful people. They have far more. They're number 1. Singapore's number 2. So what it's about is it's actually getting the trusts to sort out their finance departments and to do it. But I mean, some of it is actually British pensioners and pensioners that are living in...
Some.
Well, hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, but
hundreds of thousands are British pensioners. I mean, the other thing is look the other... Somebody, I was reading, I think it was Reform, who said we should be like America and we should judge it. But actually, you know, I go on holiday a lot in Italy. The Italian hospital has had me with a possible concussion, my son with a broken nose... All for
sounds like one hell of a holiday, Scott.
Yeah, my daughter no, this is only
sounds awful.
But the big one was somebody falling out of a window and breaking his pelvis, for which they charged. But most of it, they just go, oh no, that's fine. You know, we'll just deal with it.
But was that when we were before Brexit? I said the B word.
And you can still have a little card that means that you can do it for free in Europe. But I think instead of talking about the scandal of health tourism, what we've got to say is the trusts have got to get their act together and charge people properly.
But here's the thing, Albie. Why don't we do like America, for example, and just say, well, give us your credit card as soon as you go in there?
Look, I think there are a number of things that we can do to address this. First of all, £180 million being lost over a 5-year period, that's a lot of money. That could be used to train thousands of doctors, thousands of nurses, pay for thousands of hip replacements. And I think Scarlett is absolutely right to say the NHS needs to get better at collecting debt. I think there's probably something that we can do at the border to make sure that we're only letting people in with health insurance or a certain sum of money to ensure that they could afford any healthcare when they're in the country. But actually, Scarlett is also right on the healthcare tourism point. Healthcare tourism generated £4 billion for the NHS between 2016 and 2022. So if you take 180 million away from 4 billion, that leaves a net gain of £3.82 billion. So this is actually making money for the NHS. Yes, we should be better at collecting the debts that people accrue, but ultimately this has been a net gain for the NHS over the period where this £180 million was lost. It wasn't actually lost. We actually made £3.82 billion during this period because of healthcare tourism.
But we could be making more.
We could be making £180 million more, but I just wanted to make the point that actually over this period we made £3.82 billion from healthcare tourism. Yes, we should get better at collecting the debt, but let's not lose sight of the headline figure, which is what should be reported, that we made almost £4 billion as a net profit, a net gain to the NHS from healthcare tourism.
So the other thing I don't understand here, Scarlett, is we have managers, several layers of management in the NHS, who are paid vast amounts of money, a lot more than the doctors and the nurses who are actually doing the job. Vast amounts of money. Why can't we get one of them, of £200,000 a year, to actually start doing this properly?
Yeah, and this is exactly what the Audit Office report says. The Public Affairs Committee, they interviewed lots of people, and what they said is different trusts do it differently. Some are fine, and some actually, you know, they're left being very bad at picking up bills. So yeah, you have to get the right people. You actually have to spend. The problem is you have to spend money to get it back. You have to have people who understand about financing. I mean, Albie says quite rightly, I mean, maybe you do say you need travel insurance to make sure that you do it. Because I mean, obviously, some of these people literally fly in for operations, which is a good thing. But what we really don't want to be like America, where if something goes wrong, the first thing they do is ask you for your.
But why not? I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I think for people who are tourists coming to the country, I wouldn't be opposed to that sort of system. I think what's different in America to Britain, which might explain why they're so bad at collecting debt, is that healthcare is run as a business in America. And if the NHS was a business, they would not accept losing £180 million over a 5-year period when they could be making that money back. So I think it's partly to do with the mentality of NHS managers, in that they just think, OK, well, we've lost this amount of money, it's going to be underwritten by the government. But that's not going to happen in America, so they're much more hot on collecting debts from people, and they're not here in the UK because it's a public health system.
You're right. The other difference is that actually if somebody has an emergency, they get treated. Then they get asked afterwards about the money. Whereas we know in America, the first thing the ambulance does is, have you got a credit card? And I'd rather have our system. And it's not about our system being abused. It's about, like everywhere else, is that if you can get away with not paying it. And probably a lot of it is insurance companies. I mean, this friend of mine who fell out of the window and broke his pelvis.
On your amazing holiday in Italy.
On my amazing holiday. On a lot of holidays in Italy, to be fair. But on this particular one, he... I mean, the insurance company took over a year to pay and argued all the way through. So actually, that's one of the things, is you know, we need accountants or whoever who can argue with the insurance companies, who can say this is what it is. That's what the private hospitals have. I mean, it would be interesting to know how many people leave a private hospital with that, because actually if you're a private hospital, as I know, when the NHS has sent me to them, the first thing they do is they give you a thing saying, how are you going to pay for it?
So maybe it does need to be run more like a business.
There's always learnings from the private sector that can be applied to the public sector, in my opinion.
We're not talking about privatising the NHS, though. No one's mentioned that, by the way, but we are all going on holiday with Scarlett because it sounds a riot. We're just getting health insurance first. Thank you both. We've run out of time, unfortunately. That is the lovely Scarlett Maguire and Albie Amakona there. talking about healthcare. You're with me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News Saturday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. Pro-Palestinian protesters are occupying branches of banks across the UK, calling for a boycott of the bank over their links to Israel arms manufacturers. All of that and much more to come. You're with me, Dawn Neeson, GB News, Britain's news channel. Thank you.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Welcome back to Headliners, and Paul, we're going to get straight into Monday's mail for some good old-fashioned, traditional male breastfeeding.
Yeah. To answer the question, what is the latest woke hell, Josh? Row as hospitals say hormone-filled milk from trans women who were born male is just as good for a baby as the real thing. It's possible for men, if they pump themselves full of estrogen, to grow larger breast tissue, and they often do. If
or you just eat lots of burgers.
Exhibit A. And once you've done that, it is actually then possible to express or lactate a liquid. Okay. If to that liquid you then add another load of pills, medication, chemicals, whatever, that lactation juice can be fed to a baby.
We don't really... This is not for the sake of the baby. The baby has no benefits from this whatsoever. The studies are very weak on it. It's a bit worrying because, you know, when hospitals started indulging in homeopathy and having, the NHS had homeopathic hospitals, that was worrying because they're supposed to be a trusted authority. And before saying something like this, there should be an awful lot of study done.
I want to shame this hospital. This is
whether it's necessary.
University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. That's who it is. And they have written one of the stupidest sentences I have read aloud in the 2 years that I've been privileged to do this show. It says, the term human milk is meant to be neutral and not gender biased.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Oh, my God, we're laughing at you.
I mean, and as someone says here, babies are not props. And that's the scary thing. And when we're not focusing primarily on the health of a baby.
No, but the feeling of a person doing it rather than... It's a bit of an odd way to go, isn't it? So...
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend out there. Now, lots of you have been sending in your messages, and that's good because this programme is all about you. And Rishi Sunak and George Galloway have really got you going, and not necessarily in a good way. Susan, on George Galloway. Galloway is twisting, manipulating and confusing the public. Now, as I keep saying, George Galloway isn't here to defend himself. This is your opinion and feelings are running high. Meanwhile, Alison, good afternoon, Alison. Yeah, everyone remembers this one, don't they? Is George Galloway that idiot that pretends to be a cat on Big Brother? What an absolute... bit of a rude word. And people voted for him. Incredible. Be interesting to wander around the streets of Rochdale now asking who voted for whom and why they did. He did win a huge majority, so lots of people did obviously vote for him, and this is how democracy works. Meanwhile, you're not over keen on Rishi Sunak either, are you? This is Harold on Rishi Sunak. Would someone please ask Suella Braverman to take over the reins and actually get something done? You're not the only one to think that, Harold. Right, OK, now we'll move on, shall we? Well, kind of move on. Now, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters are marching across the country today, once again calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. They've been going for over 4 months now across the country in cities like London, Manchester and Edinburgh. But the protests aren't just happening in the street. Pro-Palestinian protesters are also occupying branches of Barclays Bank, calling for a boycott over their links to Israel arms manufacturers. Joining me now is our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who I believe is in Wolverhampton still loitering outside a bank again, Jack. You're going to get a reputation. Jack, it looks quite quiet behind you now. What's happening?
Yeah, so essentially the protest is over for today, Dawn. So 11 a.m. till 1 p.m. was the time that this National Day of Action that was organised by the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, they want people to boycott Barclays Bank. These protests today have been going on all around the country, from the likes of Abergavenny in South Wales, as well as here in the West Midlands, in Wolverhampton where I am, and across different parts of the country. They are setting out their very clear reasons, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, as to why they want people to boycott Barclays Bank. They say that they have research which says that Barclays holds over £1 billion in shares and provides £3 billion in loans and underwritings to 9 companies who this campaign say weapons, components and military technology are then being used by Israel of course, when they are likes of attacking Hamas and, of course, they say attacking civilians in Gaza and Palestinians. So one of those companies is General Dynamics, which they say includes the gun systems and things like that. So essentially, they say their argument is that by encouraging people to boycott Barclays banks, they won't have the money to be able to, of course, have these shares and, of course, write these loans to these companies. That's why they've been taking their protestations across the country in England, Wales and Scotland. But the protest today now over. We did see some confrontation from one member of the public here in Wolverhampton who seemed to keep coming back. 3 times he came back to try and voice his own opinions about these protesters today. West Midlands Police did get involved all 3 times to try and move him on. They have moved him on, and now that these protesters are gone, he's not been back again. But he was certainly confronting those protesters today. But of course, it all comes as Rishi Sunak yesterday on the steps of Downing Street, saying that he feels like forces here at home are trying to tear us apart. He says that there's no problems with those protesters that are going about their job peacefully. I have to say, from watching and observing these protests here today, there was some music, but there was certainly no chanting that we've seen here and seen around the country with these Palestine protests. Certainly some music, but no chanting as such. Just holding the Palestinian flag, holding their placards saying end the ceasefire now. But of course, Rishi Sunak feels like more has to be done, saying particularly around the police that he wants these protests to be policed rather than just watched and minded. So that's certainly what we saw here in Wolverhampton today, when there was some altercation between the protesters and a member of the public.
I have to say, it does look incredibly peaceful and calm where you are. As Jack Carson, our GB News West Midlands reporter, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon with that report. It does look calm, so maybe Rishi Sunak's words have made a difference. We'll find out, won't we? You're with Dawn Neeson on GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. But first, it's time for the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much. Good afternoon from the newsroom. It's 1:31, the headlines this half hour. Well, as we've been hearing, more pro-Palestinian protests are taking place across the country today, and that follows Rishi Sunak's warning last night that Islamist extremists and far-right groups are, he says, spreading poison and trying to tear the country apart. In his speech delivered from Downing Street, he called for the nation to come together and unite, highlighting the rise in extremist disruption, intimidation, threats and planned acts of violence. It followed George Galloway's controversial win in the Rochdale by-election earlier this week, which the Prime Minister described in his speech as beyond alarming. Developments in a manhunt that's underway after 3 people were injured in a shooting in an area of London popular with bars and restaurants. The shots were fired by assailants on a moped as they were being pursued by police in Clapham, that's in South London, at around 5 o'clock last night. We understand 2 people did suffer shotgun pellet injuries as they were drinking at a nearby pub. And as we've heard in the last few hours, a cargo ship which was abandoned in the Red Sea after a Houthi missile attack has now sunk. It comes as reports from the UK's maritime agency also suggest that the militant group, backed by Iran, have also attacked another vessel off the coast of Yemen today. The UK, the US and EU all have patrols in the region to protect commercial vessels that are passing through that important shipping route. Those are the headlines. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code on your screen or visit our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Just a little tiny bit of news to add to that is that Jerry and Chris Horner have arrived hand in hand at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Sign of unity there. Right, now remember, you can get in touch about all the topics we've been discussing today by email me on gbviews@gbnews.com or messaging me on our socials. We're at GBNews. Loads more coming up on today's show. Would you be comfortable being strip searched by a transgender police officer? The government has ordered a review after concerns were raised about people being searched by members of the opposite biological sex. All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson and you're with GB News, Britain's news channel. Put the kettle on, but don't go too far.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
You're now in exile. I imagine it wouldn't be safe for you to go back to Russia. Can I ask you if you feel safe personally, and what do you think can be done to remove Putin, or is he going to be there for as long as he wants?
I think that is, of course, fundamental question. It is there should be pressure inside Russia and outside. Inside Russia right now, it's impossible because Putin put all leaders in jail and some of us just abroad. You know, just two were already killed. Mr. Nemtsov, Boris Nemtsov, my friend, my collaborator on my party, was killed on the walls on Kremlin. Alexei Navalny was killed in jail and in the camp. And that is, the people live in fear to identify themselves as protesters, to identify themselves as against Putin's regime, etc. That's why today there is no chance for opposition to rise inside Russia. But outside, of course, this war against Ukraine, that is the fundamental issue for all foreign leaders. And in fact, just support of Ukraine and not to let Putin to destroy Ukraine, to defeat Ukraine. That is an important issue because just Ukraine, that's not just in Ukraine, war in Ukraine. Ukraine just fighting for their territorial integrity, but fighting for the whole European countries because after Ukraine, other countries could appear, other subject of aggression could be, and Putin easily could try to test Article 5 of NATO Charter. It could be one of the small countries of Baltic states.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Hello, welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Now, loads of you have been sending your thoughts in on the stories we've been talking about today. Mainly, it has to be said about Rishi Sunak and George Galloway, and I can't blame you. Feelings are running very, very high on this story, so putting me specs on. Derek on Rishi Sunak says, empty words from an empty suit. 14 months in and we're still waiting for something to happen. Now, this is interesting. Now, I don't know if you've got your tongue-in-cheek on this one. This is Billy. Good afternoon, Billy. He says, and it's all in capitals, by the way, George Galloway made me proud to be a Scotsman again last night, with 3 exclamation marks. Make of that what you will. And Chris on Rishi Sunak says, if he wants to portray strength, he needs to shout a bit more. I'm not quite sure what you mean about that. I shouted, enough people shouting on. One final one to read, because I like this one. Natasha on George Galloway. Hey, Dawn, looking as glam as always. That's it, that's it. No, there's more. I find it hard to believe how you could win a vote by sending 2 different campaign letters to 2 different demographics. I'm pretty sure deception is wrong. Well, we don't know. We don't know. That's not confirmed, and it was a democratic vote. But thanks for the glam comment. Love that bit. Now, would you be comfortable being strip-searched by a transgender police officer? Currently, officers who were born male but identify as female are allowed to strip-search female suspects if they have their gender recognition certificate. The government has now ordered review after concerns were raised about people being searched by members of the opposite biological sex. This is such a toxic, divisive, complicated subject that I'm really glad I've got someone who talks sense on it, and there's not that many around, and that's diversity and inclusion facilitator Katie John Went. Katie, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. This is one of those topics that instantly gets people screaming at one another. Understandably so in some cases, however. I like talking to you, a voice of reason. Now, what do you make of this story?
It's a difficult one because we've actually got 3 laws that, or if not more than 3, 4 kind of laws that are in play here. We've got the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984. We've got the Gender Recognition Act of 2004. We've got the Equality Act of 2010, and we've got Human Rights Acts, etc. And they all kind of, none of them kind of meld perfectly. And what it actually does leave room for is codes of practice, is common sense, is kind of best practices. And for years, we've kind of muddled along with best practices. And then people have come along with absolutist attitudes around sex and gender in both directions, in the sense that no man is ever a woman, or that a trans person is absolutely a woman. When you have these 2 absolutes, you then get these situations where, OK, so what do we do in this situation? And the searching situation works both ways, in fact, because you've got the issue around what do you do with trans detainees? Who searches the trans person in whichever direction the trans person has either gone or is arriving at? And there are rules and codes of practice that already exist for that. But there's also the Equality Act, which to some degree is actually the sensible act, because it trumps all of them to a degree, where it says that there can be reasonable exceptions. And this is what we need to apply. Look, the reasonable exception is don't do it. It's as simple as that. You know, there is no absolute right as a police officer to search someone of the same sex as your identity. It isn't about the right of the police officer. It's about the respect and the safety of the detainee, and not kind of adding further kind of insult to injury if they are an innocent person, of actually adding trauma. And particularly when you look at women's prisons, with 50% of women in women's prisons being people who have suffered domestic abuse and sexual assault, the last thing you want to do is put them through the trauma of being searched by someone that is going to make them feel assaulted. And that can be anyone. It could be a male officer, it could be a trans officer, it could even be the burly female officer if they went to a female single-sex school in their past and got abused by a female teacher, nun or whomever. People will have sensitivities.
So, Katie, obviously, it's never one size fits all, right? It's not all black and it's not all white. There are always shades of grey. Interesting you mentioned the prison situation, because we heard this week that a trans prisoner was found dead in their cell after their move to a woman's jail was blocked. Now, the whole prison issue, obviously in Scotland, became a huge talking point. Where do you stand on that issue?
I've moved my position on. I think it's kind of well known that I have shifted my position because I'm open to debate and open to discussion, open to new evidence and open to better arguments. The prison situation has changed radically. I spent a fair amount of time not in prison as an offender, but engaged with the prison system. 10 or 15 years ago. So I've been to about 50 odd UK prisons in my past in that respect. And one of the things I noticed is they actually had local policies more than national policies. But from kind of 2011 onwards, we had national prison service instructions on what to do. Everyone erred on the side of respect, erred on the side of caution, and erred on the side of inclusion. And it was only in the years following that people began to realize, but if we err on the side of inclusion, we haven't erred on the side of who are we now kind of lumping people in with? And there were a number, going back 5-6 years or more, a number of transgender suicides in prison. And that led a lot of people to err on the side of caution. Quick, get them into the women's prison to avoid suicide. You know, and putting people on suicide watch and avoiding suicide in prison is a right thing to do. But also putting transgender prisoners, particularly those who are still male-bodied or have a history of sexual violence, etc., should not be transferred to the female estate. The easy answer is come up with a third solution, which they have already done at one prison, which has a transgender wing. What they should do with 250 prisoners, of whom 70% have been convicted of sex or violence related crimes, although that doesn't mean always that they're a perpetrator. They could be in for sex work, you know, in that sense. But that number in there, but 25 of them are transgender men. It's not just trans women who have these crimes linked to them. But with 250 people, you've got capacity to create a transgender jail and to separate it by the different transgender sexes and genders and the degrees of risk and violence to each other. It's something that's been considered in the past in Italy and in California, and I think they should actively do it in the UK, and it would solve everyone's rights and safety.
There's so much mess around this, isn't there? Finally, Katie, one other thing I wanted to talk to you about was Suella Braverman has spoken out again about how she fears she could be criminalised if trans conversion therapy is banned. I mean, her viewpoint is that if you are a boy, you cannot become a girl and vice versa. Now, she fears, just by explaining that to her children, that could see her criminalised, if you were. Where do you stand on the trans conversion therapy?
Well, having kind of undergone it many years ago, by choice, actually, because I was trying to avoid being trans. So I actually went through transgender conversion therapy, but then I actually also just went through regular therapy, which wasn't kind of affirmative. It was just explorative, and it was really, really helpful. I don't think that as any situation you should be kind of penalising people who actively seek out therapy. But there's no way which anyone should actually sensible be thinking that we're going to start criminalising stating fact. Biological facts. I'm male. I was born male. I'm trans. You know, those two can both be true, and it's possible to state fact without getting your kind of knickers in a twist in that sense. And I think it should be quite doable to create good law. But what I don't want is any bad law rush through that does create these kind of new dilemmas that then have to be tested in court, and then cases get thrown out because someone has passed bad law. And that's what needs to happen. And most of the aspects of kind of conversion therapy are already prohibited anyway because of, you know, harassment and attempts to change anyone's kind of religion, sexuality or gender by force are already outlawed, you know, simply under existing acts. But a kind of a conversion therapy law should be really, really good law and should still allow the possibility of speaking truth, whatever it is, but also just, you know, decent human rights, respect and expression.
Absolutely. Katie, just one final very quick question, yes or no answer. Do you still read or watch anything by J.K. Rowling?
I've said this on record before, I still love Harry Potter and I would still sit down for a wee dram with J.K. Rowling anytime to discuss these things. We should never have got to the position where we stop discussing things and putting people in permanent sin bins at extreme ends and just allowing people to become kind of more kind of siloed within their viewpoints. I always engage across the barricades, and I don't actually see myself as on the other side of any barricade, but usually in the middle of the road being run over by everyone.
Katie, always a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for being a voice of reason in a debate that gets so toxic. That's Katie John Went there. Thank you very much. Now, you're with me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. Showbiz. The 2024 Brit Awards will see some major changes to their categories in response to the backlash of gender-neutral categories. There we go again, everything. All of that and much more to come. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Sadiq Khan, 6.3 million on a virtue signal, load of lines. Why is he spending the people's money in this way? And why is nobody saying anything? I want to hear from Suzanne Hall, the potential Conservative candidate, or Howard Cox, the potential Reform candidate who could potentially take this off Sadiq Khan. Why are they not speaking? This is ridiculous.
Well, it was sprung on everybody. Did you know about that?
I didn't know about it.
Nobody knows. So they're spending this money. They're spending £6.3 million, and no one knew about it. Where's the press? Where are the public consultations? No one knew. I think it's a good idea to rename the train lines, because all these train lines are there are like 4 of them, 6 of them, whatever, and they're all going all these different directions, and you tell someone to come, and you don't even know the name.
Yeah, but 6.3 million. Listen, if he wants to give me 6.3 million to come up with some virtue signalling lines, I'd like to know which advertising agency he employed to do this, how long it took him, and why he's even done it in the first place. Why has he done this?
He has done this. Look, with the virtue signalling, because he's part of T-World. He's Rishi Sunak. It's this whole concept is every inclusiveness. There is no country. Nobody's English. Our own history is bad. Not my history, but whatever. The English history is bad. And it's a denial of history. It's Orwellian or something. Yeah. Not that I know about.
I think it's an absolute absurdity that Sadiq Khan should be doing that. He's got a knife crime epidemic, a crime epidemic, people stealing watches off people walking down the street.
Yes.
You've got the burglary at an all-time high. London, a lot of people are put off by it. And this is what he spent £6.3 million on.
This could have been a bit
to speak as to why.
He doesn't need to speak. People need to speak out and say, well, why didn't we know about this? But the idea, can I say something to you, Nana? The idea is right. It's like, for example, take the Northern Line. You know, there are 6 Northern Lines.
6 Northern Lines.
6 different Northern Lines, maybe more now, because one goes from Mill Hill East to Mill Hill.
This was the overground he was...
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Oh, hello, welcome back. It's GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson. Happy Saturday, hope you're having a wonderful time. I'm on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, we're going there again. Woke gender-neutral categories will once again take centre stage at the UK's biggest music awards. But the Brits are making wholesale changes after receiving criticism last year when major female acts, such as Florence and the Machine, were snubbed for the non-binary Artist of the Year. Now, the category has been doubled from 5 to 10 nominations, so everybody gets a go. Isn't it lovely? Joining me now, because she knows what she's talking about, and frankly, I don't, is showbiz reporter Stephanie Tetchy. Stephanie,
Dawn.
The Brits.
Yeah, isn't this one?
However, bit of breaking news. Slightly earlier on, the Horners. Jerry and Christian.
Jerry standing by her man, as to be expected. You know, through all of these allegations of inappropriate behaviour, which Christian vehemently denies, she stood by his side. And, you know, they've always had a very strong family image.
Look,
there we
Stephanie,
go.
There
there we go.
Hands. And what, we think they're holding hands.
She's masking a lot of pain there, I have to admit. But you know what? She is someone who's all about her family, and she's worked very hard over the past few years to have this good family image, and she's changed her own image. So I don't think she's going to let these texts, which have been leaked, defeat their family unit. Not publicly, anyway.
Well, no, I wouldn't want to be here. I think we might be talking in quite high-pitched voice later on today. But they've arrived at the Bahrain Grand Prix, which is happening this afternoon, hand in hand.
I just think, again, with Jerry, she's supported him every step of this way.
They seem to have a very strong relationship.
They do have a strong relationship, and I think, you know what, to be honest, it's kind of good that it's out there in the open, because then now they can start working privately on their marriage, and Christian is adamant that he's going to be staying at Red Bull. So eventually, you know how it is, Dawn. It's news today. By next week, there'll be another couple we'll be speaking about. Hopefully not in the same regard.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it could be a couple coming from tonight's Brit Awards.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it could be.
New Brits
it
couple.
Could be.
We
know these after parties. Yes,
right,
we do. Well, the Brits, I feel like it's a bit of a tick boxing exercise, because, you know, they did get rid of the gendered categories, which last year saw that women were the ones who didn't get awarded for Artist of the Year. This year, they've gone above and beyond. 57% of the nominations are going to women. Ray, one singer you may hear about tonight, she's up for 7 nominations.
Blimey.
Yes. And then we've got the International Artist of the Year, which is heavily dominated by women again, with Taylor Swift in there. So I think it is going to be a night for the women, but how genuine it's going to be, I don't know, Dawn, you know?
Isn't it all about the record companies and how much money is invested? And it's not really rock and roll.
No, it's not.
Well, I'm sorry,
And it's not. And, you know, like, the audience does get to pick tonight who's going to win in the genre category. So we may see the Rolling Stones pick up rock and alternative, which is their first nomination in a decade. But the rest of the acts, you know, if you've kind of gone off music over the past few years, it's all the new generation that's coming up. But one thing, it's going to be all eyes to see the battle of the sexes, but I do think it will be the year of the woman at the Brits.
Basically, all they've done is, they've taken sort of like best female, best male, and lumped them all in one big... But there's 10 of them, so it's the same as it used to be.
It's a shame, because I think some women like the fact that they could be best female artists. You know, when Adele won a few years ago, she was like, I like being a woman and I want to be referred to a woman. So it's a shame that they put them all in the same category. You know, music fans, they listen to female artists for one reason, listen to male artists for one reason. And the reason why they've done this is to appease non-binary artists such as Sam Smith. He's far and few between.
Oh, yeah, quick question, we're running out of time. Are you going tonight? You got your
I am. Got the glad rags. I will be bleary-eyed in the morning.
Full update. You on breakfast tomorrow?
I am.
Hey, tune in for that one. You don't want to miss it. Thank you very much,
No
Stephanie.
worries.
Tune in tomorrow. She'll be away with it. I'm Dawn Neeson. It's GB News Saturday. Lots more coming up. But let's have a look at the weather with Greg, shall we?
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. We still have areas of rain, sleet and snow pushing northward through today. Frost and fog and some icy stretches for tonight, and staying quite cold, and we can see that nicely on the air mass chart. This pool of cold air sat over the UK. Something milder trying to come in by the beginning of next week, but a cold weekend to come. For the rest of the afternoon into the evening time, we've got these areas, outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow pushing northwards across northern England into Scotland, perhaps affecting parts of Northern Ireland too, are covering over the high ground. Overnight, clearing skies, particularly across central and southern parts of England and Wales. We could see some dense fog patches, some frost and icy stretches as temperatures fall below freezing here. So a bright start in some places, drier than it was on Saturday morning, but some dense fog patches, particularly across central southern England. This slowly lifting and breaking through the day. And then overall, Sunday will be a bright day, some sunny spells, scattered showers across western areas, again a bit wintry over the higher ground. This weather front could give some thicker cloud across the far east of the country. Temperatures quite cool still, 7 to 9 Celsius, but in any sunshine, not feeling too bad. And then for Monday, a cold and frosty start, some fog patches, and then that mild air starts to come in, but in association with this area of rain across southern and southwestern areas. Over the next few days, it brightens up a little. There'll be some sunny spells and temperatures start to rise as well, back into double figures, particularly in the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Meanwhile, we've got Prince William getting on with being a real royal, or is he? I mean, this business about being ambassadorial in the Middle East, about the Gaza situation, about the Israeli situation, about trying to be friends with everyone, this is sensitive ground.
It's very demanding, I think. It must be one of the most difficult things he's ever done. He has been to Israel before and the Middle East. He was the first of the royals who went there, and he spoke to the leaders of both in Israel and on the West Bank.
Yeah.
And he managed it beautifully. He managed to carve a very sort of delicate path. I think as well, he doesn't want to cut ribbons. He doesn't want to do the ordinary things, to go round and see people and do it unless he really cares about it. This is people who are homeless. These are people who are in a war. I think he wants to go very, very high up, not for arrogance.
Make a difference in the world.
But to help, and to try and smooth things
Angela,
over.
I might be way off the mark here, but he did not, to me, look a happy man at BAFTAs on Sunday night. There was just
lonely, for sure.
Yeah, there was just something about his face that looked like I didn't want to be here.
It did. He did look lonely, but I also thought he made a huge effort so that everyone would enjoy it. He didn't want to pass it on. He doesn't use his personal feelings publicly, whereas Harry, you can tell a mile off what Harry's thinking. So he's done very well for that. And I think because he's been their president since 2010, he didn't want to let them down. Very nice of him. But he's obviously very worried about her. And he's got a lot of pressure there. I mean, he's a man with massive pressure for his father, for his wife, making sure the children are all right. And now he's taken on the Middle East, you know.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome to GB News Saturday. I'm Dawn Neeson, and for the next hour, I'll be keeping you company on TV, online, and on digital radio. Keep you up to date on all the stories that really matter to you. Cracking hour coming up for you. Is democracy under threat? The Prime Minister has warned extremists are trying to undermine British democracy as he called for the country to come together and beat this poison. Also issuing a direct plea to pro-Palestinian protesters, calling them to reject radicals who are hijacking their marches and urge police to take a tougher stance. And then, is the Royal Air Force leaving Britain defenceless? It's decommissioning 30 Typhoon jets. I didn't know we had any, amid strenuous budget cuts. But considering the growing threat from Russia, not to mention the Middle East, is this the smartest move? And new research shows the number of people taking the driving test in an automatic car has increased by over 200% over the last decade. I'm asking, is Britain having a gear change? But hey, this show is nothing without you and your views. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today, or whatever you want to chat about basically Saturday afternoon. Email me on gbviews@gbnews.com or message me on our socials @gbnews. But first, here's the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much. Good afternoon from the newsroom. Just coming up to 2 minutes past 2, and we start with a recap of the news we've been covering for most of the day today, that dozens of pro-Palestine marches are expected to take place in towns and cities across the UK this weekend, after Rishi Sunak called on organisers not to let extremists hijack those protests. In his speech delivered from Downing Street last night, he called for the nation to unite, warning that Islamist extremists and far-right groups are spreading poison and, he said, trying to tear us apart. It followed George Galloway's controversial win in Rochdale's by-election this week, which the Prime Minister described as beyond alarming.
The Rochdale by-election returned a candidate who dismisses the horror of what happened on October the 7th. Who glorifies Hezbollah and is endorsed by Nick Griffin, the racist former leader of the BNP. I need to speak to you all this evening because this situation has gone on long enough and demands a response not just from government, but from all of us.
Well, opposition parties have now given their reactions to the Prime Minister's speech, and those reactions have been mixed, with the Liberal Democrats accusing him of sowing seeds of division. However, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said that Rishi Sunak was right to call for the country to unite and to condemn what he called unacceptable and intimidating behaviour. Meanwhile, the new MP for Rochdale, George Galloway, who's also a former presenter for Iranian state TV, says the Prime Minister is playing a very dangerous game that could drive young Muslims into extremism.
It's worse than a lie, it's dangerous. Because, you see, if you're saying to Muslims who vote that your vote will be delegitimised if you cast it the wrong way, and if you go out on a demonstration peacefully to demonstrate, then you'll be called a terrorist, and new laws, new police approaches will be conjured forth against you. If you do that, you are driving people away from the path of democracy and peaceful democratic protest.
Organisers of those protests this weekend have now responded to the Prime Minister's pledge to back stronger police action, suggesting that he should expel some of his own MPs from the Conservative Party because of their divisive views. It's after Rishi Sunak pledged last night to support the robust policing of demonstrations, particularly, he said, pro-Palestinian marches. The Metropolitan Police have in the past said that showing support for a terror group is a criminal offence, adding that the right to protests comes with a responsibility to act within the law. Several local marches are planned today and tomorrow, before another national demonstration in the capital coming up on the 9th of March. A manhunt is underway after 3 people were injured in a shooting in an area of London that's popular with bars and restaurants. The shots were fired by assailants on a moped as they were being pursued by police in Clapham in the south of London at around 5 o'clock last night. 2 people, we understand, did suffer gunshot pellet injuries as they were drinking at a nearby pub, and a 3rd person was also injured by the moped itself. Police, though, say the injuries are not life-threatening. Well, we've learned today that a cargo ship, which was abandoned in the Red Sea after a Houthi missile strike off the coast of Yemen, has now sunk this afternoon. It comes as reports from the UK's maritime agency suggested in the last few hours that the militant group backed by Iran have also attacked another vessel off the coast of Yemen. The UK, the US and the EU all have military ships patrolling the region to protect commercial vessels that are passing through that important shipping route. And in the last hour or so, we've heard that the fashion icon Iris Apfel has died today at her home in Florida at the age of 102. Known for her distinctive glasses and her fun, no-nonsense approach to fashion, she founded the luxury company Old World Weavers with her husband in 1950. And she went on to lead a long career in fashion. Then, at the age of 97, she signed a major modelling contract with global agency IMG, and that was just a year after a limited edition Barbie doll was created in her image. And finally, the best of Britain's music industry are gathering in London for this year's Brit Awards, including the Princess of Pop.
Everybody's doing a brand new dance now. Come on, ready to
She needs no introduction. The singing superstar Kylie Minogue will be crowned this year's global icon, and she'll be performing a medley of some of her greatest hits. Leading the main awards, however, is Ray, who's already broken records with 7 nominations. That's the most in a single year. She's up against some stiff competition, though, with Dua Lipa and Olivia Dean also up for key awards tonight. Those are the headlines for now. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, it's back to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Sam. And I challenge you now not to be singing The Locomotion in Your Head by Kylie Minogue. Actually iconic, wasn't it? And I've heard of someone actually performing at the Brits, her and the Rolling Stones. Oh, my God, that's my age. Right, OK, let's get straight into today's story, shall we? Now, Rishi Sunak has claimed that democracy is under threat from extremism in the wake of Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. In a speech to the nation, he also said there are forces here at home trying to tear us apart. Let's have a listen.
But I fear that our great achievement in building the world's most successful multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy is being deliberately undermined. And I want to speak directly to those who choose to continue to protest. Don't let the extremists hijack your marches. You have a chance in the coming weeks to show that you can protest decently, peacefully, and with empathy for your fellow citizens. Let us prove these extremists wrong and show them that even when we disagree, we will never be disunited from our common values of decency and respect.
Blimey. Right, joining me now is a political astute commentary there. Joining me now is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, who will say more than the word blimey, possibly. Nigel, is democracy under threat? Should we be worried? We're getting lots of messages in from viewers here who are saying they are actually seriously worried where we're going in this country with extremists interfering with our democracy.
Well, I think unless there's some intelligence we don't know about, that there's some sort of horror lurking around the corner, then I really feel we ought to actually keep a sense of perspective about this. We've had during the week Harriet Harman turning around and saying that MPs should be allowed to join House of Commons debates by Zoom in the same way they did during the pandemic. That's been rightly rejected because that really would be sort of letting the mob take over. And also, just remember that intimidation has been worse in the past, that when the RA were active on the mainland, MPs were being assassinated and bombed on a reasonably regular basis. So we're not at that kind of level yet, which is why I think everyone should actually calm down a little bit.
Don't you think, I mean, the one thing that struck me yesterday, lots of things struck me yesterday. The one thing that struck me, I listened to the speech expecting, like everybody else, that there was going to be some grand announcement, maybe that general election when the lectern came out. It's all very dramatic. Dark on a Friday night. It's all blimey, what blimey again? What's happening here? And then we had this speech. And, yeah, I was nodding along. I mean, there are things going on here. We saw the chaos in Parliament the other day. We had the mob outside. We had From the River to the Sea, flashed up on Big Ben. And then we went straight after that. We went straight to Rochdale, and a reporter was interviewing George Galloway. And I thought that, I don't know if you saw it, Nigel, I'm sure you probably did. It was with Sam Coates. And I think that interview proved everything that Rishi Sunak was saying. I mean, we're used to doing, you and I, intimidating interviews in political circumstances. But there was a mob around George Galloway that were trying to shout the interviewer down and basically trying to close down that debate. And I thought, to me, that just proved pretty much everything Rishi Sunak said, that there is something to worry about.
Yes, I did see that interview, and I think that you're absolutely right, that it looked very uncomfortable for the reporter who was doing it when he was trying to interview a by-election victor, and there was a somewhat intimidating crowd of people around him. So I'm not denying all these things exist. What I'm actually saying is, just how serious is it? George Galloway's election was really a one-off, I think, because it was such a strange by-election that Labour didn't really have a candidate in the field. So there wasn't a place for people's votes to go if they wanted to support somebody from the left. And George Galloway is the only one there. But again, I don't think we should actually give too much importance to this. It's the fourth time he's been an MP. He does create a lot of noise, but he doesn't change British politics in the way he keeps claiming.
No, I mean, the one thing you can say about George is he was democratically elected. It was an amazing victory. He's a great politician, and he does have an amazing ego. Maybe that's what we need in our politicians these days. Nigel Nelson, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. Now, I've got a great panel to discuss this one, and it's good to get the younger perspective on it as well, because Nigel and I are of that generation. So joining me now is the host of GBNews, the Saturday 5, Benjamin Butterworth, and former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Charlie, I'm coming to you first. What did you make of Rishi's, not just his speech, but the way he delivered it yesterday?
I thought he actually got it spot on. I thought the tone was right. I mean, it could have come a bit earlier, actually, not a moment too soon, in my view. 20 to 6 on a Friday night might have been a bit sort of late in the day. But given everything that happened, just as you were talking there with Nigel about the interview that took place, the intimidation, you know, of the media, which is something that is alarming, I think, for everybody, where the media hold politicians to account. That shouldn't be happening in our public life. That shouldn't be happening in our politics. But I think, given the build-up of events, an article by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman talking about extremism in the country, then comments by Lee Anderson, which obviously caused a huge conversation to take place across the country about whether that was right, whether it was wrong, the sentiments there, what it meant, and people's strength of feeling about what was meant by those comments, to then see the intimidation in Rochdale. I think it was about time, actually, that the Prime Minister was right to say, ahead of protests that were taking place this Saturday in London, across the country, that the police will police them properly. They won't just manage protests. There should be no room for hate speech in this country. There should be no room for the mob who decide to go and protest outside MPs' homes, to intimidate MPs, to scale their homes, or to put hate speech plastered across our buildings and our public buildings, particularly Parliament of all places. It was getting a grip of the situation and saying to the country, this is not on, this cannot continue, it will stop, the police will take firm action. And as Prime Minister of this country, he's told police chiefs to be as firm as he possibly can, and it won't stand 1 second longer.
But I heard all that, and I heard all the problems we have, and I am actually worried about democracy, especially when journalists are treated in that way as well, trying just to interview the winner of a by-election. What I didn't hear, Benjamin, was any answers.
I mean, yeah, that is what I was going to say. The first thing, and lots of people will point this out, Nigel Nelson just did, is that George Galloway is the most extraordinary egotist. You know, this election is not about Gaza, it's about George Galloway finding another way to execute his divisive, aggressive, self-absorbed version of politics. This is a man that went in the Big Brother house while a Member of Parliament. He doesn't give a damn about the people that he claims to represent. All he cares is that we're still talking about him, and he'll be thrilled that at 69 years old he's got back in. Now, what I would say is that, on the one hand, I can hear the Prime Minister's speech and look at it, lots of it objectively, and say I most certainly agree. We have seen a ratcheting up of tensions. We have seen a considerable abuse of intimidation towards the Jewish community that is appalling. And we've also seen that now reflecting back on many innocent Muslims in this country. The problem is that, as Charlie basically pointed out, we have had this for months now. And I fear that his choice to do it yesterday, to do it on the steps of Downing Street, which I think is slightly inappropriate. That is a moment for the death of a monarch, a terrorist attack, calling a general election
announcement.
Precisely. I think the reason he chose to mention George Galloway as the touch flame for this is because he knows that that will cause serious division and anger, because those people, a lot of Muslims in this country who feel very angry at what the government, what the parliament is doing over Gaza, I don't share their view, but they're very angry. He knows that by making George Galloway the centre of it, it will splash back on the Labour Party a lot more than the Conservative Party. And I think party politics in an upcoming general election is definitely a part of the way he chose to go about
That's an interesting point, actually. No one said that point. So let's actually have a listen to what George Galloway himself said after Rishi Sunak's speech.
It's worse than a lie. It's dangerous. Because, you see, if you're saying to Muslims who vote that your vote will be delegitimised if you cast it the wrong way, and if you go out on a demonstration peacefully to demonstrate, then you'll be called a terrorist, and new laws, new police approaches will be conjured forth against you. If you do that, you are driving people away from the path of democracy and peaceful democratic protest.
Charlie, he notoriously always stands and wins in areas with a very high Muslim constituency. Do you think he plays the Muslim race card?
Well, I think he certainly galvanised his support on the issues that cared to a lot to people in these particular communities. But going back to that clip, I mean, that is just testament to what is the fundamental problems that we have in this country. So, yes, of course it is the case, George, that many people that go on protests weekend after weekend, they are peaceful protests. But to say that they are all peaceful protests and that there isn't a problem and there's nothing to see here, and if you just go on a protest, you're just going to be deemed a terrorist, that is, turning a blind eye, frankly, George, I would say directly, to the people who are coming to London or anywhere else in any other city across the country who shout for jihad, that plaster on our public buildings, from the river to the sea. This is anti-Semitism. This is hate speech. This should not be taking place in our city centres. This should not be taking place in this country. And if George can't grasp that or understand that that is happening in this country, then he is part of the problem, not the solution.
He is, look, I keep saying he's not here to talk to himself. George, give us a call. And he is democratically elected, and congratulations for winning. Benjamin, why did people vote for him? Why do you think people voted for him?
I think there's a real sense now, as when the Iraq War was going on, which is, when he had his first triumphant return to politics on this kind of agenda, there is a sense among British Muslims that they're being othered, that they're not being listened to, that they're being excluded. And there is truth to that. The problem is that he takes advantage of that divide and tries to tell them, yes, you are being excluded, yes, they do hate you. This is the politics of division that George Galloway peddles. This is a man that only in the past couple of months was speaking at a university, and a student got up and he said, "Where are you from?" And they said, "Oh, I'm from Israel." And so he walked out of the room. He refused to talk to someone because the country they are from. Now, it is hard to conclude that is anything other than racist behaviour. And what I would also say, and Nigel Nelson kind of said it, is that he will be keen in these days to exaggerate the impact and the extent to which he speaks for Muslims in this country. Let's think back to, I think it's Bradford West, where he stood against Naz Shah, a Muslim woman who is an extraordinarily strong woman. She had been sent back to a different country. She'd been the victim of terrible abuse. Her mother had been killed. And he made fun of that. He mocked that in the election against a Muslim woman. This is someone who stood in elections and said Allah knows who the true Muslim is when against a Muslim Labour candidate.
I remember that very well.
And so he tries to play the divisive card. But do you know what? He wins at by-elections over and over again. He never wins in general elections when people think seriously, because they don't want that division. Muslims in this country, like most other people, actually want these issues solved.
We actually want to just live in a fair democracy, don't we? Which, I mean, George won, it was a fair democracy, and George has constantly denied that he is racist or anti-Semitic. He won that by-election democratically, and he's obviously not here to answer for himself. Benjamin Butterworth and Charlie Rowley, thank you so much. Again, a subject that has very, very strong emotions. What are yours? GB Views at GB News. Let us know. And for all the best analysis and opinion on that one and that story and any more you want to talk about, go to our website, gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Saturday, and there's loads more coming up on the show. Now, knife crime. It's on the rise in Britain with 50,000 offences a year. That's a 5% higher compared to the year before. We'll be discussing how to tackle the scourge of knife crime. All of that and much more to come. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
We're always told that there is a huge need for care workers in Britain. We're always told that the salaries just aren't big enough against the benefit system for British people to want to do that work. And there probably is some real truth in that. And yet, if up to 25% of those that come are acting illegally, and it would seem up until now that in some areas foreign care workers come in but bring in almost the same number of family members with them, that we need to have a proper debate about this. I'm very pleased to be joined by Mike Padgham, chair of the Independent Care Group. If I accept those arguments for a moment, how can it be that the system is so lax that up to 25% are found by the Inspector of Borders and Immigration to be working illegally?
Well, good evening to you, Nigel. It was good to join you. I mean, those figures are shocking to me. When I looked at it today, when I saw that 275 visas that had been issued to a care home that didn't even exist, and a further over 1,000 people joined a company that only had previously 4 staff in it, it makes me wonder the bureaucracy of the Home Office didn't think to check that these companies exist in the first place, because it should be quite straightforward. If people are providing care, they're regulated by the Care Quality Commission. It's a simple phone call to check and double check. Sadly, there seems to have been very many loopholes at the beginning. I believe that's been tightened now, but I can't understand it, because all the providers that are doing it in the proper way have to go through quite a rigmarole to actually get approved, and it takes months. So it beggars belief that this has happened and people have been approved for a company that doesn't even exist.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on telly, online and on digital radio. Now, another hot topic that doesn't go away, knife crime. It's on the rise in Britain. In the year ending September 2023, it increased to just under 50,000 offences. That's 5% higher compared to the year before. In South Yorkshire, Ministry of Justice data showed that 2/3 of cautions or convictions for knife crime in the area were handed to first-time offenders. Why aren't kids listening? Our Yorkshire reporter Anna Riley has been to a charity-run event in Sheffield involving young people to get knives off the street.
Giving a helping hand to stop young people from carrying knives. Anthony Olasende founded charity Always an Alternative after growing up surrounded by knife crime in Sheffield. He wants to get knives off the streets of the Steel City and launched an awareness event at Showroom Cinema.
When I was 15, I saw someone get murdered. They got stabbed to death, unfortunately. But what was strange, it didn't really affect me because I was around that kind of stuff all the time growing up. Violence was normal. Every day I'm looking over my shoulder. Every day, you know, someone's getting locked up or someone's getting injured. Surely life can't just be that. I had a few lucky escapes myself and I thought, I've actually had enough. I work more than this. This can't continue to happen. I've got kids now. I don't want to not be there for them, so I made that decision.
Keaton Naylor experienced the pain of losing a loved one to knife crime. His best friend, Louis Phillips, was stabbed to death at the age of 15 by a stranger during an unprovoked attack in South Yorkshire.
Ever since I lost my best friend, it's made me realise, well, knives really aren't needed. Like, there's so much more to life than carrying a knife, well, just a weapon in general. He was training for Barnsley Football Club. He was doing well, getting grades and that. He'd just applied for college. So he really wasn't a bad lad.
Tackling knife crime to prevent further tragedies is a priority for South Yorkshire Police.
The police are obviously doing a lot in terms of trying to identify, locate and target those individuals or gangs that are prone to violence and use guns and knives. So there's a lot of work around that. But prevention is really the more important thing. How do we stop young people?
Back at Showroom Cinema, students from a Sheffield high school produced a short film to highlight knife crime amongst teenagers.
It was really educational, and you don't understand how bad knife crime is until you're being told the figure.
Something like this could happen to me, could happen to anyone. It is concerning, and it is something that, that I don't want to happen.
With recent figures showing 17% of knife crime offenders in England and Wales were under 18, it's hoped schemes like this will deter children from carrying weapons. Anna Riley, GB News.
OK, right, joining me now is knife crime campaigner Ken Hines. Ken, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I really appreciate your time, because you've been there, you've been one of those kids. Why are we still having this conversation, Ken? Why is it still happening?
Look, 50 years on, we seem that we have the dial has not moved on, right? Because we're still doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. The sort of things we're doing, we're not investing in youth services, we're investing more in the prison services. And when you see that the public-private partnership between the government and the investors, to say that they're now making prison a profitable business, it shows you where the real energy is going. Because if you're spending billions on prisons and only tens of millions on youth services, it's not surprising that we've got that disparity here. But let me say this much. What you also got, because if you really want to tackle it, then what you would do is to be much more harsher on those who get caught with a knife the first time around. When you don't take them out of our community, I'm not saying it's always prison, but you've got like these youth ball store that we used to have, where you get a lot of drills and you get things put into your heads that really scare you straight. Then what do you? When you instead what you give them is a slap on the wrist every time they get caught under the age of 18. It's not surprising that we're finding young people, even younger, from the age of 10, now carrying, I used to carry a flick knife or a lock knife. These are small knives back in the day, because I was scared of being stopped and searched, and I got a chance of getting away with it. Now they're carrying Rambos, they're carrying swords. Before they used to wave it around to scare people, now they're taking it out to murder you. Where's it gone? If we really want to stop it, because particularly in London where I am, I'm on the front line. I'm part of the group called Street Fathers. So we're out there and we are engaging with these youngsters, and sometimes we come across youngsters who have these knives, and we give them the option. Either they give it up to us, to myself, and they may get a slap, or they give it up to the police and they get themselves a criminal record. But there's no option for them to walk away in my community with that knives and with their volatility. It's not happening.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. What are the kids saying to you, Ken? What are you? 10-year-olds. We've seen 10-year-olds. I'm like you, a Londoner. 10-year-olds carrying knives in London. Yeah. What are they saying to you when you stop them? Saying, "Why are you doing this?"
It's simple. They say the same thing. What they're saying is, we're walking with our knives because we don't feel safe. It's for our own protection, because they may have been robbed, they may have been confronted, and they're saying what we're doing now, we need to protect ourselves, because what they don't believe in is the biased policing that we have been part of for the last 50 years, that they haven't held themselves accountable. And even now that they're trying to reach out to those communities to find ways that they can better interact between the police and those young people, it's not happening because it's been too endemic. The rot has gone too far. What they need to do is have people like myself and the group that I work with, Community Against Violence, Street Fathers, Father to Father, these groups actually have an input to young people and help change their psyche. It's about growing their emotional resilience. It's about growing their resilience and making them feel much more comfortable in their skin.
Ken, very wise words. We need more men like you out there talking to these kids because the message isn't getting through. Thank you so much. That's Ken Hines, knife crime campaigner. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Just quickly, the name of the organisation you work for?
It's called Street Fathers.
Street Fathers, and it's online if people look for it.
That's right. They can
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ken. Right, OK, you're with me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News Saturday. Lots more coming up on today's show. But first, let's get the news headline with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much. Good afternoon from the newsroom. It's 2:32 and the headlines this hour. We start with the pro-Palestine protests that are continuing to take place across the country following Rishi Sunak's warning last night that Islamist extremists and far-right groups are spreading poison and, he says, trying to tear us apart. In his speech delivered from Downing Street, he called for the nation to unite, highlighting the rise in extremist disruption, intimidation, threats and planned acts of violence. That followed George Galloway's controversial win in the Rochdale by-election earlier this week, which the Prime Minister described as beyond alarming. A manhunt is underway after 3 people were injured in a shooting in an area of London that's popular with bars and restaurants. The shots were fired by assailants on a moped as they were being pursued by police in Clapham, South London, at around 5 o'clock last night. 2 people, we understand, suffered shotgun pellet injuries as they were drinking at a nearby pub. And a cargo ship which was abandoned in the Red Sea after a Houthi missile attack has now sunk this afternoon. It comes as reports from the UK's maritime agency earlier suggested that the militant group, who are backed by Iran, have also attacked another vessel off the coast of Yemen. Meanwhile, the UK, the US and the EU all have patrols in the region to protect commercial vessels that are passing through that important shipping route. Those are the headlines for now. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Now, remember, you can get in touch about all the stories we're talking about, and such amazing stories. Thank you for being with me. I really appreciate it. It's very simple to find out go to our website, and if you want to get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.com, or message me on our socials. Please do get in touch. Such important stories, I can't tell you. But there's loads more coming up on today's show. Now, is the RAF leaving the Britain Defence List? The Royal Air Force is decommissioning 30 Typhoon jets amid strenuous budget cuts. But considering the growing threat from Russia, not to mention the Middle East, is this the smartest move? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson and you're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Is a debate on gender really a far-right issue?
Far right. I'm so bored of that phrase, you know what I mean? Like, anyone who talks about... anyone who acknowledges that there are two sexes is suddenly far right, because that's what Hitler and Mussolini were all about. This question from Shirley is, of course, about Labour. They've been accused of being undemocratic because they pressured a pub into cancelling a debate, and this debate features Kelly J. Keane, who's been on this show a couple of times, and she's a campaigner, and she was just on the panel, and then they got a letter saying that they couldn't do it because Kelly J. Keane apparently attracts far-right groups. Now, they've tried this trick before, but because some awful, ghastly neo-Nazi types turned up near to an event that she was holding in Australia, they kind of tried to blame that on her and suggest that the two were the same thing. They weren't. That was an opportunistic group turning up to... they're not... neo-Nazis aren't pro-feminist. They're not pro an event called Let Women Speak. That's just ridiculous.
New Zealand's TV blurred her touching her zip because they said that her touching her zip was a far-right dog whistle because she's making that symbol.
Yeah, but she wasn't making the symbol, she was just adjusting her zip.
Yeah, and also, this isn't a far-right symbol.
I mean, that was incredible because she obviously wasn't making that symbol anyway. She was just adjusting her top. But this New Zealand news channel blurred out the hand so that they could pretend that it was some horrible ghastly...
Yeah.
I mean, this is low stuff, isn't it?
She's talked about having voted Labour in the past. She's so not far right.
But also,
I mean,
even if she were right-wing, which she isn't, why would they be banning a panel where there's a discussion about one of the most important issues of our day? What are Labour playing at here?
They're anti-democratic, aren't they? They're just kind of playing whack-a-mole with things they don't like. I think maybe I'll write to the pub and say I do want to see Kelly J. Keane there.
Yeah, but they won't listen to you
well,
if
no,
you say that, will they?
Won't.
Because you've got the unfashionable opinion, Chris.
Well, and the unfashionable workplace.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hello, welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson. Hope you're having a wonderful afternoon out there. I'm on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, the RAF is decommissioning 30 Typhoon jets amid strenuous budget cuts. Considering the growing threat from Russia and the Middle East, this decision has been likened to the UK scrapping Spitfires before the Battle of Britain. So I want to know, is the RAF leaving the British Isles defenceless? Now, proper experts talk about this. Defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Robert, thank you very much for joining me. Now, I wasn't even... if you read all the newspaper reports, I mean, we're so defensive. I wasn't even aware we had 30 Typhoon jets left to get rid of in the first place.
We've got 137. These are old Typhoons, which are used for one job, which is to take on other aircraft coming in, basically other aircraft. They do it in pairs, quick reaction force. You would have seen them preparing in the 2012 Olympics. That was where it's actually old hat. And that's why they're bringing them out of service early, because they want to work on the more modern Typhoons, which we're seeing bombing the Houthis at the moment. And if you're going to defend Britain, you've got to do it with what's known as an air-land concept. That means missiles and such like, from ground to air. And there's an enormous bill coming up for all of that.
Right, OK. Every time you say you're going to cheer me up, and you never actually quite achieve that, Robert. Talking of the Houthis, they've sunk one of our ships, haven't they?
Well, finally, since this campaign began mid-November with the hijacking of a freighter called the Galaxy Leader, crew still hostage, one of their hits has finally sunk. It's British registered.
Right.
Rubemare. And so that is a big strike. They not only struck it, but it was under tow, but sinking. And there's been another incident 2 days ago concerning this. So things are really hot. I've just had Arab TVs on to me. They want me to sort of put my hand up and say, oh, it's all over. It's failing against the Houthis. No, this is the beginning of a very, very long campaign. And there will be, I think, a rather greater rather than lesser British commitment because there is a very direct British interest.
So does this up the ante? What's happened?
It will up the ante, but they've been watching it all the time. They're very worried about the Houthis. They've been more adroit. They're technically capable. Most of the technology comes from Iran. It has to be said. And there is a fear that there's a much bigger game going on here. That not only are the Houthis are a sort of almost a test to see that what they can do to really control the Bab el-Mandeb, Red Sea, for the Iranians to work out what their parallel strategy and the parallel waterway of the Straits of Hormuz would be. Now, if we're talking about the Straits of Hormuz, where we have a British patrol, 40% of the world's exports of hydrocarbon, gas and oil come through those straits.
That doesn't sound good news.
It's not good news.
That's getting messy, which brings us on to the other story. Well, there's two more stories I want to talk to you about. And this one is concerning the budget coming up on Wednesday. So far, you're not portraying a very happy picture of what's coming up as far as the MOD are concerned. Now, Grant Shapps wants more money in the budget.
They always do.
Jeremy Hunt says not likely, matey. Do you think the MOD... I mean, currently we're spending 2.2% of our GDP on
Slightly
defence.
under.
Yeah. I think Shapps wants 2.5. Do you think we should be allocating more money to defence at the moment, given the situation you've just talked about in the Middle East and obviously the ongoing situation in Russia?
If we're serious about this with Ukraine, the Houthis, and what's going on in the wider Mediterranean and these kinds of waterways, where Britain, by the IMF rating, is the fifth most effective, powerful commercial maritime power still, with the US in fourth and the Netherlands in sixth, curiously. We've got to do it. So much of maritime insurance, as well as licensing and traffic, comes through the UK. This is a vital interest. 50% of our food is imported. I think they know, behind the Speaker's chair or whatever goes on in the equivalent of the smoke-filled corridors, as they used to be, that they know they've got to spend more on defence. Both Labour and the Conservatives know that. Labour is pledged to a defence review. When you get people as different, varying as John Major saying, yes, you've got to do it, William Hague, I think there's pretty much agreement. But Jeremy Hunt, who does look at global strategy, he will be Mr. Niet, as they said of Khrushchev back in my day, when I came into journalism. But he knows it's a holding operation.
It's a stitch in time, isn't it? And finally, we are running out of time, unfortunately, Robert. The US beginning to aid airdrops into Gaza, but critics are dismissing this as inadequate.
Desperate measure, desperately risky, can be quite dangerous where you're dropping this stuff. But it shows that something really is moving from Biden regarding Gaza and regarding Netanyahu's hard line from Israel.
But the thing is, that's not targeted. That could be going to Hamas.
Well, that's the problem. It comes up, but it also often hits civilians. I mean, it has a very, very difficult record, although there is experience because, of course, the Royal Jordanian Air Force has been doing it to some degree.
Right, OK.
And I'm sure there would be some British training and support behind that. But it does show that things are changing. And what is worrying, as the Israelis still talk about an assault on Rafah, goodness knows, with all those hundreds of thousands of refugees.
Where are they meant to go?
That there is no dialogue.
Yeah. Frightening. We've had a very good dialogue this afternoon. Thank you very much, Robert. That's Robert
I'm
Fox.
sorry I couldn't cheer you up.
No, yeah, I know. Try harder next time, OK?
Yep.
That's Defence Editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Thank you very much, Robert. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. New research shows the number of people taking their driving test in an automatic car has increased by over 200% over the last decade. But I'm asking, is Britain having a gear change? All of that and much more to come. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far now.
From From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Welcome back to Headliners, and Paul, we're going to get straight into Monday's mail for some good old-fashioned, traditional male breastfeeding.
Yeah. To answer the question, what is the latest woke hell, Josh? Row as hospitals say hormone-filled milk from trans women who were born male is just as good for a baby as the real thing. It's possible for men, if they pump themselves full of estrogen, to grow larger breast tissue, and they often do. If
or you just eat lots of burgers.
Exhibit A. And once you've done that, it is actually then possible to express or lactate a liquid. Okay. If to that liquid you then add another load of pills, medication, chemicals, whatever, that lactation juice can be fed to a baby.
We don't really... This is not for the sake of the baby. The baby has no benefits from this whatsoever. The studies are very weak on it. It's a bit worrying because, you know, when hospitals started indulging in homeopathy and having, the NHS had homeopathic hospitals, that was worrying because they're supposed to be a trusted authority. And before saying something like this, there should be an awful lot of study done.
I want to shame this hospital. This is
whether it's necessary.
University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. That's who it is. And they have written one of the stupidest sentences that I have read aloud in the 2 years that I've been privileged to do this show. It says, the term human milk is meant to be neutral and not gender biased.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Oh, my God, we're laughing at you.
I mean, and as someone says here, babies are not props. And that's the scary thing. And when we're not focusing primarily on the health of a baby.
No, but the feeling of a person doing it rather than... It's a bit of an odd way to go, isn't it? So...
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend out there. It's a Saturday afternoon. Enjoy yourselves. Now, is Britain having a gear change? I don't mean the outfits, by the way. New research shows the number of people taking their driving test in an automatic car has increased by 238% over the past decade. And not only that, a whopping 70% of new cars registered, 70% of new cars registered in 2023 were automatic. Joining me now to demonstrate how to use a gear stick properly is broadcaster and motoring journalist Danny Kelly. Steady on there, Danny. Danny, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Now, you're a car expert. Full confession, I haven't driven a car for over 20 years now because I live in London and it's impossible. What's going on here? Why aren't people driving proper cars anymore?
Because people have seen the light dawn. I've been banging on about the relative ease of driving an automatic car for years. And once you go to an automatic car, in my experience, very rarely will people want to go back to changing the transmission themselves. Because don't forget, I know you haven't driven in 20-odd years, Dawn, but you still have to use your left leg to put down the clutch and then your left arm to wrestle with the gear change. The much easier way of driving is to let the car do it itself and just use the one leg, which is your right leg. So I've been saying it's the easy way of driving. Don't forget our American cousins. They don't really have, they call them stick shifts. Yeah, man, you drive a stick. We call it manual, they call it stick shift. They don't really drive manuals because the Yanks have had it right for generations of cars. And 70% of new cars are automatic. And that is for one or two reasons. Basically, people wanting to just drive in an easier style, Dawn, but also hybrid cars and electric cars, they don't have manual transmissions. And more people are driving electric cars, of course.
But, I mean, the thing is, I was always taught when I was a kid, back in the dark ages, I mean, we're talking Flintstones, you were literally putting your feet through the floor and running along. Joking, not that old. But it was like, if you can drive a manual car, right, you can drive anything. You can get in any car, anywhere in the world and drive it. If you can only drive an automatic, you're lumbered. Like if you go on holiday and you get in a hire car or something like that, America accepted, surely it's better to have that skill in the first place, to be able to drive anything.
Yeah, I agree, because if you take an automatic-only test, that precludes you by law from actually getting behind the wheel. So I agree, Dawn. For example, when I used to work in the hotel game, the best managers could manage each department. They used to spend time in the kitchen. They used to spend time doing the laundry. They used to spend time as a barman. And that's because they mastered all of the arts. And I think you're right. That's an analogy, because you can drive anything. You can drive an auto as long as you pass your manual test, but you can't drive a manual if you just take your auto test.
OK, and the other thing I want to talk about to you, Danny, is our speed limits. This is why I don't drive, because in London you can't drive, basically. It's impossible, and you certainly can't drive over 20 miles an hour. But motorway speed limits of 60-mile-an-hour restrictions are to be scrapped. This sounds like good news.
Thank God for that. As a motorist who does 18,000 miles a year, I didn't understand. They put a 60-mile-an-hour stretch, Dawn, across swathes of mostly Midlands and Northern motorways. It was to try to reduce air pollution. But guess what? The Highways Agency don't know if it's because of more electric and hybrid cars that the air pollution has dropped, or whether it's the speed limit. The Daily Telegraph did a great story, Dawn. You'll love this, because I know you really are flustered by people who need safe spaces. They actually contacted the Highways Agency for some information, and the Highways Agency couldn't comment because it needed a safe space in order to collate all the evidence. You heard me right.
Seriously, you're making it up.
I promise you couldn't make... This is glorious. You couldn't make it up. The Highways Agency couldn't give a comment to the Daily Telegraph because they needed a safe space whilst they worked everything out. And as a motorist, I know, Dawn, I can see your face. As a motorist, I want to do excess of 70 miles an hour. I want to do 70, 75, 80 miles an hour, because that's the unofficial speed limit, 75, 80. The old bill won't pull you over for doing 75 or 80 miles an hour. And to reduce it to 60, it just makes people angry because they don't understand why they're being asked to do 60 miles an hour. And God forbid you go under one of those gantries with the cameras, you do 68, 70, that's it, 3 points on your licence, £100 fine.
Yeah, I think they were making quite a bit of money on these as well, weren't they? I mean, perish the thought that was ever the idea. Danny, thank you so much for... I'm going to let you get back to playing with your gear stick now, love. Danny, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Danny Kelly, motoring journalist. I really appreciate your time. Oh, that's it for me. We've come to the end of the show. But stay tuned, because Nana is up next, and she's going to have a cracking show for you, because she always does, doesn't she? Nana, oh, my God, look at you. Why do you look so stunning all the time?
Well, because my husband's coming, so...
Mr. Nana.
Oh, not really, no, there's no such person. No, but coming up on my show today, I'm very excited to announce that, of course, we'll do the usual. We'll have a chat with Uri, catch up with what's going on in Israel. We'll be discussing, I mean, you were talking about it earlier, but what Rishi Sunak's speech, was it too little too late? And are we now at risk? Is our democracy really under peril? Is he right, you know? And then we have Jason Gale coming into the studio.
Oh.
Yes, so he's my special guest for Difficult Conversations, so we'll find out about what an entrepreneur does and how he set up the Lifestyle Awards. So, yeah, it's very exciting.
Excellent. But that's the whole Rishi Sunak thing. Isn't that just mind-blowing? I was expecting a general election announcement, weren't you? It's like, OK, oh, right, that's what you're going to say.
Well, it took him ages to get to the point and say anything. But, I mean, I'm glad he's finally said something. But, you know, is it too little too late? So we'll be talking about that.
Isn't it astonishing, though? Suella Braverman says it and she sort of gets sacked, and then he comes out and stands by election and it's fine.
It does seem very odd, doesn't it? The Tory party, they are imploding from the inside out, so we'll see where this takes us. But I'm looking forward to chatting to everybody about that.
George Galloway's waking up every morning going, I've got everyone on the ropes here. Everyone on the ropes, one man.
Not really. One man, one cat. He was a cat.
Oh,
we may well bring that back, so stay tuned towards the end of the show in clickbait. We have a fabulous.
You're showing
shot
that.
of
If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. Right, I'm Dawn Neeson. It's GB News Saturday. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your time, all the messages. Now, but don't go anywhere because Nana's up next. She's got a cracking show, including that cat scene. But let's get the weather first with Greg.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. We still have areas of rain, sleet and snow pushing northward through today. Frost and fog and some icy stretches for tonight. And staying quite cold, and we can see that nicely on the air mass chart. This pool of cold air sat over the UK. Something milder trying to come in by the beginning of next week, but a cold weekend to come. For the rest of the afternoon into the evening time, we've got these areas, outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow pushing northwards across northern England and Scotland, perhaps affecting parts of Northern Ireland too. We're covering over the high ground overnight, clearing skies, particularly across central and southern parts of England and Wales. We could see some dense fog patches, some frost and icy stretches as temperatures fall below freezing here. So a bright start in some places, drier than it was on Saturday morning, but some dense fog patches, particularly across central southern England. This slowly lifting and breaking through the day. And then overall, Sunday will be a bright day, some sunny spells, scattered showers across western areas, again a bit wintry over the higher ground. This weather front could give some thicker cloud across the far east of the country. Temperatures quite cool still, 7 to 9 Celsius, but in any sunshine, not feeling too bad. And then for Monday, a cold and frosty start, some fog patches, and then that mild air starts to come in, but in association with this area of rain across southern and southwestern areas. Over the next few days, it brightens up a little. There'll be some sunny spells and temperatures start to rise as well, back into double figures, particularly in the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
You're now in exile. I imagine it wouldn't be safe for you to go